Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Cosmic Mind Quirk? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku was 4. He noticed something on the ground. It was a rabbit. The sun was out, warming the sidewalks. Birds chirped overhead. Izuku Midoriya held her son's hand tightly as they left the local train station and walked past an old alley behind the grocery store. He could somehow sense the life force of the creature. Every cell, every muscle, every atom. Its breaths were shallow. It only had a couple of minutes of life left. Its whiskers were tainted by the blood leaking on the concrete. "Mommy, look." Izuku tugged at his Inko's coat. "What is it, sweetie?" she said, holding her son's hands tightly. It had been 2 weeks since they'd been to the doctor and her son was announced quirkless. It wasn't what they expected. He felt things. Talked about dreams where he flew without wings. He knew when she was sick before she did. But the scans were clear. No extra joint in his pinky toe, no energy channels, no detectable mutations. Inko had cried quietly that night while her son fell asleep holding a crayon drawing of All Might. "That rabbit, it's dying." Inko's face scrunched up, turning to where her son was pointing. Indeed, a black-furred animal lay with its eyes wide and a cavity in its stomach. "Oh, Izuku!" She rushed to push her son away from the horrible sight. "Don't look at that." Izuku didn't want to look. Who could stand the sad sight of dead animals? But he somehow felt drawn to it. He could read its emotions: distress, misery, frustration. Izuku rushed over to the injured bunny, breaking away from his mother's grasp. The red blood painted the concrete. "Izuku, wait just a minute." Inko stood frozen a few steps behind, torn between calling animal control and pulling her son away. "Don't look at that, baby. That's just part of life." The boy scanned over the rabbit, almost as if he were working at the vet. He could see everything: how the rabbit got injured, the atoms that made up its entire being, and its blood leaving its body in droves. A soft green glow emerged from his chest. It pulsed outward, curling around his arm, swirling like mist. The light gathered in his hand and poured into the rabbit. Bit by bit, the cells of the rabbit reappeared. For a few seconds, there was silence. And then, the rabbit twitched. Its wound knit itself together with supernatural ease, fur slick with blood smoothing back into place. Its breathing even. Its dull eyes fluttered, and impossibly it blinked, lifted its head, and darted off into the nearby grass like it had never been hurt at all. "Izuku!" Inko cried out in shock. What did you just?" But he didn't answer. The green light vanished. And Izuku slumped to the ground, unconscious. Here they were at the hospital. The doctor's room was a sterile place. Too clean. Too cold. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, flickering every few minutes like they couldn't decide whether to stay on or off. It was annoying. Inko held her son close in her lap, brushing his hair as he napped against her chest. He'd woken up after a few hours at home with no memory of the rabbit, only asking why her face looked so red. She didn't have an answer that wouldn't leave her child worried. After a few seconds of silence, the doctor came into the room, plopping a stack of medical files on her desk, turning her attention to address the mother. "Mrs. Midoriya, it would seem that good news is available. Even though your son is double-jointed in his pinky toe, your son does have a quirk. However, there is an even more important topic we'd like to discuss with you." Inko placed her hand on her chest, excited for the news. She knew Izuku would have been bouncing off the walls if he was awake to hear the news. "Essentially, we ran some high-resolution scans. Your son's neurological growth is extreme. His brain is triple the size of someone his age. It's something we've never seen. It seems to be related to his quirk maybe." Hearing this, Inko was initially shocked. Shouldn't they have picked this up the first time? Why didn't this show up on any earlier scans? Inko asked, twisting her finger through Izuku's curls. The doctor blinked rapidly and continued. "The brain is a complex organ. Even in today's world, many still study the psychological aspects and their relation to quirks. Maybe the machine malfunctioned or something. But what our team is currently suggesting is that his brain was hiding itself from the scans. Inko could only stare in shock. Hiding? The doctor nodded her head in agreement. In this earlier scan from the time he was announced quirkless, the brain is missing from the X-ray because he was awake. Now that his quirk has revealed itself and your son is asleep, the brain has appeared. Inko could feel her brain disappearing from hearing all this new information. It would be impossible for an organ that's located in the body to hide, unless it is somehow conscious. The doctor grasped her clipboard. This is truly good news. We can work closer and closer to figuring out what your child's quirk is. We're gonna have to run more tests. She simply nodded, knowing there was nothing she could do for her child now. The day continued as different doctors ran in and out of the room, sweating Izuku with different medical instruments. They regularly fed him snacks and juice boxes to keep him compliant. They didn't need to do that, however, Inko knew her boy was the sweetest. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile white glow over the tidy room. Walls lined with posters of colorful shapes and smiling cartoon brains did little to mask the clinical tension. Izuku swung his legs nervously on the edge of the cushioned exam chair, red shoes kicking the air in rhythm. Across from him sat a woman in a gray cardigan and thin-rimmed glasses, her clipboard resting neatly on her lap. Behind the two-way mirror, 3 doctors watched with rapt attention. A digital monitor to the side tracked Izuku's vitals, along with a subtle, slow flickering pattern they hadn't been able to explain. Midoriya Izuku, age 4. The psychologist spoke gently, voice slow and warm like honey. We're just going to play a few games today, all right? Izuku gave a small nod. His eyes wandered to the table beside them, where a row of blocks, cards, puzzles, and sheets of paper waited like strange artifacts. He didn't really understand what was going on. After he'd healed the bunny glowed and then healed it, his mom had taken him to the hospital. But these weren't the same doctors. These people didn't wear scrubs or ask about sore throats. If he ever saw colors when people spoke, or if he heard thoughts that weren't his. He hadn't answered most of them. They scared him a little. Now, he just wanted to go home. Let's try something simple, the psychologist said, sliding over a series of cards. Can you tell me what comes next in this pattern? Izuku blinked at the cards. Square, triangle, triangle, square, triangle. Square, he said softly. She smiled. Good. And how about this one? More cards. This time, numbers and shapes rotated in a sequence he didn't recognize right away. But something in his brain stirred, an almost invisible thread tugging the answer toward his tongue before he could reason it out. Red hexagon, he whispered. Her pen paused. Behind the glass, one of the doctors, a neurodevelopmental specialist, leaned forward in his chair. He didn't even hesitate. That sequence is meant for adolescents, not toddlers. Dr. Sasaki, the lead, didn't answer right away. His gaze was fixed on the child's face, how his pupils dilated slightly right before he answered, how the heart monitor picked up then dipped into an eerie calm. Run the matrices test, Sasaki murmured. The full one. Back inside, the woman brought out a new activity, pictures with missing pieces, logic puzzles, folding patterns in 3 dimensions. Izuku's breathing slowed as he stared at each one. He tilted his head to the side, and his eyes grew slightly unfocused, glassy, far off, as if he were looking through the paper instead of at it. He answered all of them. Rapidly. Would you like to keep going? She asked. He shook his head. Can I see Mom now? Of course, sweetie. Her voice wavered just slightly as she stood. When the boy left the room, doctors immediately pulled up the recorded data. His final score estimate had gone off the chart literally. The test system, calibrated for up to 160, had thrown up a margin of error flag. This can't be right, muttered one technician. You'd need a child genius with eidetic memory and spatial manipulation to hit that range. Dr. Sasaki didn't blink. Or something else entirely. On the footage, they rewound to the moment Izuku touched one of the puzzles. A faint shimmer, barely perceptible, glimmered around his fingers. 6 hours had passed, then 7, and finally 8. Inko clutched her purse so tightly her knuckles went white. She would never claim herself as the impatient type. She'd learned early on that worrying wouldn't make time move any faster, but this was so excruciating. It was only so long that she could stand her child being thrown around like a laboratory experiment. To hell with finding out a demon quirk, she thought, her heart pounding. She wanted to see her son. She needed to wrap him in her arms, reassure him that everything would be okay. Finally, the heavy door swung open, and a young doctor in a crisp white coat stepped inside, clipboard in hand. He scanned the row of anxious faces until his eyes fell on Inko. "Mrs. Midoriya?" he asked, voice gentle but brimming with excitement. "We're ready to go in now." Inko rose, her legs stiff, and followed him down the bright hallway. Each step felt surreal, as though she were moving through a fading dream. The corridor opened to a small consulting room, where papers and printouts lay scattered across a metal table, and a single chair waited for her. The doctor wheeled his monitor closer. "Mrs. Midoriya," he began, clearing his throat. "This is truly remarkable. Your son's brain shows full structural development, and at only 4 years old, that's unheard of. His cognitive activity is still accelerating. His IQ is in the range of 160. Inko's breath hitched. 160? She echoed, voice trembling. "You're saying my son is smarter than most adults?" The doctor smiled, but there was a strange intensity in his eyes. "Yes. We've double and triple checked the results. The subtest's verbal reasoning, spatial intelligence, working memory, he outperformed every child and adult we have on record. And that's not all." He tapped a button, and the screen flickered to a series of brain scans overlaid with energy signatures. "Your son appears to channel a form of energy that doesn't match any quirk or any known human ability. The readings are almost cosmic in nature." Inko's legs buckled. The chair scraped across the floor as she sat heavily, her hand coming up to cover her mouth. "Cosmic?" she whispered. The doctor nodded, leaning forward. "Here's what makes this so extraordinary. Quirks typically inherit in 3 ways: combined traits, strengthened lineage, or diminished expression. Based on genetic sequencing, we expected at most a slightly stronger version of your quirk. Instead, Midoriya's power operates on an atomic scale, with resonance patterns we can't yet explain. It's beyond telekinesis. He's touching the very building blocks of matter." Outside, down the long hallway, the waiting room clock ticked on. But in that small consulting room, time felt charged with possibility, transforming Izuku's life, and her own, into something that would never be ordinary again. Days after the rabbit incident and then visiting the doctor felt like a dream, and Inko felt busy all the time, even when she wasn't at work. Izuku soon excitedly started a new notebook on the possibilities of his quirk, doing extensive research online. With every new anecdote came new interesting trials for the boy to test. As they were told by the doctor, Izuku had unquantifiable intelligence for his age. He began filling out math books like a marathon and absorbing information instantaneously. Every day when she came home from work, Inko brought home a book for him to read, and the very next day Izuku would beg on his knees for another. Inko decided to stay home for a couple of weeks to help Izuku gain some control of his developing powers. During their weeks together, more powers were discovered. They quickly found out that Izuku could read minds when he slightly suggested buying apples when she thought of going to the grocery store. It was uncanny, almost instant. Izuku continued to test the limits of his newfound telekinesis. While Inko was still spooning rice into bowls, the entire silverware drawer opened by itself with a sharp clack, sending every fork, knife, and spoon hovering in perfect formation above the kitchen table. Without saying a word, Izuku twirled his finger in the air. The utensils responded in kind, spinning in coordinated spirals like a school of fish dancing through water. Inko dropped the rice scoop in shock. From that point on, his control grew fast. And so did the scale. At school, it didn't take long for his classmates to start noticing. During art class, when a gust of wind knocked over a rack of paint jars, Izuku caught all of them midair without touching a single one, suspending the colorful glass containers in a rainbow arc before placing them neatly back on the shelf. The class gasped. A few kids even clapped. In gym, he casually untied the dodgeball net from across the room with a flick of his hand, unraveling the knots with invisible fingers before it slithered to the floor like a rope snake. When the teacher asked who did it, half the class pointed at Izuku, beaming. He became the topic at lunch. Kids asked him to lift their backpacks without moving. They handed him juice boxes and giggled when the straws wiggled themselves into place. He was like a walking magic show. Even the older kids started to notice him. The 6th graders asked him to levitate the soccer ball at recess. He did more than that. He spun it in place, then launched it into the goal with enough speed to make the net ripple. But not everyone was cheering. Inko watched her son from the kitchen doorway, clutching a dish towel to her chest. He sat cross-legged on the living room floor, a mountain of books surrounding him like a fortress. His pencil scratched quickly across his notebook as pages turned on their own beside him, fluttering in the air without a hand to guide them. She didn't interrupt. He often muttered to himself when he was like this, eyes unfocused, breathing shallow. The air always felt different when he concentrated too hard. Thicker. She glanced down. The dish towel was wrung tight between her fingers. What was this? Later that night, she stepped quietly into his room. The dim blue nightlight cast gentle shadows across his face, and the covers were pulled up to his chin. She leaned in and kissed his forehead, brushing aside a strand of messy green hair. "Good night, sweetheart," she whispered. "Night, Mom," he mumbled sleepily. She turned to go, but paused when she heard a faint hum behind her. Turning back, she saw the outline of the blanket glowing faintly from beneath. Inko walked back, lifted the edge of the blanket and gasped softly. Beneath the covers, floating in midair, was a miniature galaxy. Tiny stars and swirling clouds of light hovered above his chest, orbiting a pulsing speck of yellow energy. It shimmered with its own light, as real as anything she'd ever seen, impossibly beautiful in its fragile perfection. Izuku's eyes were closed, lips slightly parted in sleep, hands curled gently toward the stars he had made. Inko let the blanket fall back into place, slowly, quietly. She stood beside the bed for a long while, her hands trembling. In the weeks of his tenure at Andrea Junior High, Izuku is a jittering mess. This isn't unusual for someone of his nature, anxious, wimpy, and unable to stand without his knees wobbling. His pen tapped against the corner of his desk, bouncing to the beat of his heart. The entire room hummed with chatter, chairs squeaking against the linoleum as classmates whispered and passed notes. Today was a mix of excitement and fear. In a couple months, he would never have to take a glance at this trash dump of a middle school, except if he chose to take his children, though highly doubtful. He rubbed at his temple, shifting his weight in the hard plastic seat. His other hand continued to scribble obsessively in his notebook, hero analysis for the future. The page was half filled with notes on MT Lady's debut this morning, timed punches, height advantage, crowd control flaws. In the margin, he doodled a clunky sketch of her pose mid-leap. UA was the current goal, one of the most prestigious schools in all of Japan. Almost every hero who landed in the top 10 graduated from there, including the all-time hero, All Might. Izuku had admired him since he was a kid, and would practically eat away at his mother to buy him the newest figurine, poster, or video game. Even before awakening his quirk, he'd already known what he wanted to be, a hero. Not just someone with power. Someone who ran toward danger. Someone who smiled through fear. Someone who made people feel safe. Though quirks remained somewhat of a mystery, most scientists had many ideas of how they might have come into the world. Some believe an asteroid landed on Earth and the radiation emitting from it caused human DNA to mutate and give birth to special abilities. Others have guessed that quirks were created in labs and slipped into the human race by placing special chemicals in the food. However, whichever theory you believe, one thing is for certain. No one wanted to be a hero as much as Izuku Midoriya. "So, my wonderful students," the teacher began to announce. "It's time that you all start thinking about your futures." Half the class groaned. Izuku's anxiety mixes with his eagerness to create a whirlpool of emotions as he sits at his desk. While the teacher is speaking, he's drastically writing in his notebook, taking notes of everyone's quirks. He'd memorized most of them already. Daisuke could manipulate dust and small debris. Aiko had a vocal distortion field. Ray could briefly suspend the weight of small objects. None were particularly flashy, but that wasn't the point. Izuku recorded everything. Combat potential, rescue viability, support category estimates, mental temperament. He had rows and columns for every single one. "Hey, Teach," a kid renounced snarkily. "Don't lump me in with these losers who aren't even good enough to push a bucket." He was met with jeering. A few kids laughed nervously, but no one dared challenge him. Izuku chewed on his lip and hoped that Katsuki wouldn't notice him. They had once been friends. Kind of. But when Izuku's powers had finally awakened late, unexpected, and completely unlike anything anyone had ever seen, everything changed. He became hateful, nicknaming him Deku, and harassing him any chance he got. "Oh, that's right, Katsuki. You're applying to UA if I'm not mistaken," the teacher said with excitement, most likely happy that someone would at least try to bring notable alumni to their underfunded school. "Demon right. None of you extras even stand a chance," Katsuki arrogantly announced. He stood up without being asked, pushing back his chair with a screech. "I'm gonna be the only one from this shithole to get in, surpass All Might, and become the best hero in history." Izuku kept his eyes on his notebook. He knew better than to listen to his empty platitudes. Even the strongest Quirks didn't guarantee a spot at UA. Their entrance exam was brutal physical tests, obstacle courses, real-time threat evaluations. Even a prodigy could wash out if they hesitated once. He looked like a king expecting applause. "Izuku, aren't you planning to go to the UA as well?" "Well, isn't that just gonna set him off?" Izuku could only exhale. Katsuki's gonna come charging at him before he could even answer the question. Izuku could get in. Someone offered from the back. Another voice chimed in, "Hell yeah. His quirk is the most powerful in this class." It was meant to help. It didn't. Izuku took a glance up to see Katsuki standing above him, his hand gripping the desk until it smoked. A bead of sweat ran down his face as he looked into the ash-haired boy's eyes of red emerald fury. "You think you could compare to me?" Katsuki asked mockingly. "You're not even close." The smoke from his palm curled upward, tainting the air with the scent of spent matches. Izuku felt the heat radiating through the desk. He swallowed hard. "You have the wrong idea, Kaken," Izuku said calmly, regulating himself to not cause a scene. "I'm not trying to compete with anyone. I want to help people with my power." "You think you could become a hero?" scoffed Katsuki, smoke vaping from his hands. "You don't even fight back. You're a coward. A power like that is wasted on the likes of you." Izuku simply turned his attention back to the board, further igniting Katsuki's wrath. "You're gonna try to ignore me, huh?" Izuku only sighed. The day had finally concluded. Izuku gathered his belongings, holding especially tight to his aforementioned notebook. As soon as the students started to exit the building, Izuku started aggressively writing notes on MT Lady's debut performance that took place that morning. She could honestly break into the top 20 at this rate. He muttered to himself excitedly. Kamui Woods could also quickly climb the ranks. Izuku climbed out of his desk, ridding his pants of soot from earlier explosions. He zipped open his backpack, itching to put the notebook inside before it was yanked. "Kaken." Izuku glanced over, saying with no surprise as he could already sense that the explosion boy was coming into the classroom before he even stepped out into the hall. "This conversation ain't over, Deku." He gritted, giving Izuku a mean glare. "What the hell are you even writing in here anyway?" asked one of Katsuki's minions. "Hero analysis for the future." #, Katsuki mumbles, placing the notebook on his glistening palm. "Hero analysis? What a loser." One of the kids laughed, folding his hands to his stomach. Izuku didn't react. He didn't move a muscle. He could have easily retrieved the notebook without much effort. A simple reach of his hand and he would have been his property again, but he froze. He couldn't move. "Here's the thing, Deku. Try and get this through your stubborn brain. I'm gonna be the first and only student from this crappy school to get into UA." An explosion erupted from his palm, searing the notebook, and causing Izuku's mouth to open with surprise. "So don't even think about applying or else." Izuku could only focus on his hero book falling to the ground, blacked pages and the smell of burning paper. That art. How could he do such a thing? That took hours of effort and research. Izuku glared at Katsuki, a smug look still plastered on his face. He was angry, so angry. More angry than he'd ever been in his life. What are you gonna do about it? Katsuki smiled devilishly as he flexed his quirk, explosions echoing tiny pops. Izuku felt his aura spike, his hair lifted as if he were underwater. His fingers twitched by his side, and with only that subtle motion, the three bullies were forced to the ground, an invisible pressure surrounding them. What the hell is going on? One of the bullies asked fearfully, trying desperately to stand and resist the crushing force. Is this his quirk? Izuku's eyes glowed an emerald green. Textbooks, notebooks, loose papers all began to rise into the air, circling Izuku in a slow, silent orbit. Chalk popped out of the tray and floated like white bullets. You will never get to decide my future, Izuku said, voice low and shaking. I'm applying to UA and I'm gonna be a hero who saves people with a smile. With a deep breath, he clenched his fists and the floating objects dropped. The desk stilled. The lights stopped flickering. The pressure lifted all at once, leaving the classroom in silence. Katsuki lay on the ground, breathing hard. Izuku walked past him, toward the front of the room, raising his finger and attracting the notebook to his hand. You're a coward, Izuku. Izuku glanced at his notebook as he walked under the overpass. Though burned to high hell, the pages remained intact. Izuku placed his hand over the book, emitting a green glow. Like magic, the notebook returned to pristine condition. Izuku grinned, his hair shining as it touched the sun. He passed over an open sewer covering, paying attention to only his phone. It was news broadcasters covering a robbery that had just been stopped by Hawks, a new hero who quickly climbed the ranks and was now one of the top 5 heroes. Ah yes, you'll do nicely for my new skin, a gnarly voice said under the cover of the dark alley. Don't try to resist. Izuku turned around with a blank look on his face. I need your body for a moment, kid. You'll feel something and then nothing. A villain? The slime lunged at Izuku, enveloping his body in the greasy substance. 2 tendrils came to life and tried to force themselves inside of Izuku's body. The team didn't show any signs of distress. He simply conjured a force field around his person, permitting the villain from attacking. The sludge clawed at the irked shield, desperate to get his hands on his new victim. Izuku lifted his hand, a green glow enveloping it. What the hell is happening? With a single flick of his wrist, the sludge villain exploded outward, hurled across the alley in a spray of foul goo. It slapped into the walls and dumpsters, twitching in confusion. I am here. Izuku turned around once again, only this time his expression was in instant fanboy mode. He recognized who was behind him. It was only the most powerful hero in the world that he's been a fan of since he could even remember. All Might. Izuku questioned with excitement. It is I. All Might announced like he needed an introduction. Have arrived to take care of say where is it? Izuku glanced down at his shoe, where a piece of the sludge villain squirmed. Is this what you're looking for? Ah. The hero confirmed, taking 2 empty soda bottles out of his pockets. In blurring speeds, the entire alley was rid of the slime in all of 10 seconds. I thank you, civilian, for your assistance. You have quite the power. Sorry for you to be caught in all this, young one. Rough sewer system. All Might continued. No problem. My name is Izuku Midoriya. It truly is an honor to be in front of you. I want to be a hero that behaves the way you do. Also, can I please have your autograph? Izuku exclaimed, bowing ever so stiffly. All Might simply pointed his finger at the notebook, already holding his signature. You already signed it. Thank you, sir. All Might looked on at the fanboy crying out tears and gave a slight chuckle. Well, young Midoriya, I am glad you're safe. However, this villain needs to get to jail before he escapes again. Izuku could only stare as the hero packed the bottles into his pants pockets. He couldn't help but feel something was off about the hero. His spirit felt like only a kindle and not a flame. Please watch yourself as I take off. All Might stretched his legs, preparing himself to make a bounding leap across the city. However, a green hue suddenly shimmered around him, soft but electric, like phosphorescent mist tightening into invisible bands. His legs refused to move. What the hell is this? All Might barked, alarmed. His muscles tensed, struggling against the unseen force. Am I being restrained? Izuku froze, eyes wide in horror. I'm not doing this. I swear I didn't. The teen looked over his body. The same eerie green light pulsed around his fingers, flickering like flame in the wind. It was warm, buzzing. His chest burned with heat that wasn't painful but deeply, unnaturally alive. He looked down and his notebook slipped from his hands as his fingers trembled uncontrollably. He wasn't trying to activate his quirk, it was doing it all on its own. The light intensified. Suddenly, All Might dropped to one knee, gritting his teeth as a sharp, alien pressure dug into his side right where the scar was. The long, ragged injury across his torso, the one he'd carried since his fateful battle years ago, ached. No burned. Kid, what the hell are you doing to me? He barked, beads of sweat forming atop his brow. Izuku backed up in panic. I don't know. I'm not doing this. A warmth spread through All Might's side. The pain didn't spike, it faded. Gradually. Like the tide receding. He blinked rapidly, chest heaving, eyes wide with confusion. The green light from Izuku's hands reached out toward him, stretching like ribbons of silk, and as it wrapped around his torso, his breathing grew easier. Stronger. His skin shivered as the light soaked in deeper. All Might gasped. Impossible, he whispered, pressing a hand to his side. Izuku looked towards the hero, the green light subsiding. Why did that even happen? Izuku knew that his quirk would sometimes activate automatically to heal his injuries, small things, cuts, scrapes, even the occasional twisted ankle. But this was different. He hadn't been hurt. And he'd never healed someone else before. Not like that. I didn't even mean to, he said softly, more to himself than to All Might. You just regenerated damage that dozens of specialists told me was irreversible, he said. His voice was quieter now. Grounded. Less like the symbol of peace and more like a man. Izuku swallowed hard. Damage? What do you mean? Izuku asked curiously. Damage. All Might sighed. I suppose I should tell you the truth, he said. About the scar. About everything. All Might's voice was low and even, like someone reciting a memory etched into stone. 5 years ago, I fought a villain. The worst I've ever faced. You won't find his name in the papers, and most of the public doesn't even know the fight happened. Izuku's breath caught. For someone to have done that to All Might, he must have been one hell of a foe. He was a monster, All Might continued. Not just in strength but in mind. Strategic. Cold. Ruthless. He didn't care about cities or chaos, only about winning. About control. I went into that fight thinking I could end it clean. But he hesitated, then slowly lifted his shirt, just slightly revealing smooth, unblemished skin. He stared at it with something like disbelief. It used to be right here. A gaping wound across my side. Nearly took out my stomach and part of my lungs. My organs were shredded. I survived, but barely. The doctors did what they could. I wore a smile on the outside and kept up appearances, but I've been running on borrowed time ever since. He let his shirt fall. Every time you've seen me on TV fighting villains, saving people, I've been doing it with half a lung. And I couldn't hold my hero form for more than a few hours a day. That's why I started disappearing. That's why I needed to retire soon. Izuku's eyes widened. But you kept going. I had to, All Might said quietly. If the symbol of peace vanished too quickly, Japan would fall apart at the seams. I've been hiding the truth. Covering my weakness. All while looking for anyone who could take my place. He turned to Izuku, still wearing his signature smile. And then, you happened. Izuku looked up. You didn't just heal me, young Midoriya, All Might said. You gave me something back I thought was gone. A second chance. This was quite a lot. Not only was the symbol of peace dying without anyone knowing, but there was also a villain on the loose with a power that could critically injure All Might of all people. All Might, who could level buildings with a single punch, who stood unshaken in the face of disasters and armies. And yet, he had been almost killed. It didn't feel real. Your power, that wasn't just regeneration. That was something deeper. Targeted. Purposeful. Has this ever happened before? Izuku nodded. Back when I was 4, I brought a rabbit back from the brink of death. I had no control over it, it was just drawn to me. Sometimes I heal myself, but it's always small things. Scratches, nosebleeds, bruises. It's like, if I get hurt, it fixes itself. All Might studied him a moment longer, arms folded. And you have no idea how it works? He lifted his hands, still faintly warm. Sometimes I feel things. People's emotions, intentions, pain. Like I can sense where something's broken inside someone. And if I concentrate, or if it kicks in on its own, I can reach in. Like I'm rearranging something under the surface. But it's not just healing, is it? All Might questioned. I don't know what my quirk is, he said, voice quieter now. They never gave it a name. All Might's brows furrowed as he listened. I've crushed a soda can from across the room without touching it, Izuku continued. Stopped a falling bookshelf without moving. Sometimes I see things flashes. Energy. It's like the world gets loud all of a sudden. He looked up, nervous but determined. It's not just regeneration. That's all of it. Telekinesis. Energy projection. Psychic pressure. Emotional perception. And yeah, sometimes healing. I think my quirk works on the mind and spirit as much as the body. All Might was silent for a long time, clearly processing. He looked down at his hands, curling his fingers. I didn't mean to heal you. I didn't even know I could. It was like, something in me recognized that you were hurting. Not just physically. It reached for you on its own. All Might turned away, stepping toward the edge of the alley. The skyline stretched before him, cold steel and glowing windows, endless. I don't know what you are, young Midoriya. I've never seen a power like yours. If you're willing, I'll train you. I'll help you understand your power, and allow you to understand what you're fully capable of. Then, unexpectedly, All Might smiled. And it just so happens, I'm going to be a teacher. Izuku blinked rapidly. Wait, what? At you, All Might clarified, folding his arms. Starting next semester. It's all under wraps right now. The media doesn't know yet, and only a few people on staff are aware. I was supposed to be a figurehead, just a presence to inspire the next generation. He gave a wry chuckle. I can see now that teaching is more than standing in front of a classroom. If I'm going to do this right, I need to understand the next generation. Izuku blinked, stunned. Would you allow me to be your mentor, young man? Izuku stared, motionless. I would be honored. Meet me at the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park in 2 days. All Might requested. There is where we'll begin training. Izuku stood on the sands of Dagoba Municipal Beach, cursing the entire town of Mufsju. This entire scene, which was supposedly a place of ocean views and childhood memories, was filled to the brim with trash, from laundry machines to scrapped cars. It was quite a shame this place had become so riddled with waste. The sun was just beginning to rise, a mixture of orange and yellow giving a golden hue to the city. Izuku arrived at the beach almost 30 minutes earlier than All Might had requested. His mother always spoke about his weird habit of getting to places earlier than everyone else. I didn't hurt anyone though. Besides, his nerves wouldn't have let him sleep any longer anyway. The first impression laid on Izuku, besides the trash, was how much he could feel around him. Every object, every hunk of steel and fragment of plastic buzzed faintly at the edge of his awareness like they carried memories. Old energy. The stubborn residue of people's carelessness, their frustrations, their loss. It all clung to the junk like dust, and his mind soaked in it. This speech needed a miracle. Hello, Midoriya. A voice boomed behind him. He could recognize the presence, All Might. He turned, and clear as day stood the pro-hero in a light red and blue jogging suit. His blonde hair stood wild and defiant against the early morning breeze, and his smile practically glinted in the sun. All Might, Izuku breathed, awestruck for the 100th time. I see you're early, the hero said, placing his hands on his hips with a laugh. That's the spirit of a true hero. All Might strode closer, the gravel crunching beneath his sneakers. Up close, his presence was even more overwhelming, not because of his size, though that was part of it, but because of the confidence he radiated. The way the world just seemed to get brighter when he smiled. Well, I'm glad, he said, his tone softening. Because we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Izuku blinked. Young Midoriya, you are quite powerful. Your quirk allows you to do things I've never thought possible. But physically, you're weak. All Might said bluntly. All Might walked over to a lone refrigerator, lifted it as if it were a bag of groceries, and placed it on the ground. He proceeded to take a rope out of his pocket and tied it around the fridge, stretching out the rope a few meters away from him. All right, Midoriya, he said while leaping on top of the fridge. Now I want you to grab that rope and pull this fridge over to the trash pile. Izuku had a nervous look on his face. It wasn't every day you were asked to pull a fridge 10 miles. But he trusted All Might to never lead him astray. Izuku's training had begun. You've got this. You've got this. Ahai. Izuku pulled and pulled the rope with all of his heart. He closed his eyes, crunched his teeth, and dug his red sneakers into the sand as he yanked the rope, but it proved for naught with his limited physical abilities. Plus, All Might sat atop the fridge, wearing the smile of the ages. The team couldn't possibly tell if the #1 hero was enjoying this or not. You okay down there? You've got to take a look at this view, it's gorgeous. All Might taunted. You know, most people do this regularly, without using any type of power. Izuku continued at this for several minutes. The rope burned against his palms, friction turning them red. His sneakers dug trenches into the sand as he tried to leverage every ounce of his strength. A standard fridge weighs about 500 pounds, and with you weighing approximately 496, it's almost comparable to moving a fully grown elephant. Izuku would comment while continuing to tug the rope. Not to mention the sand is too soft and offers no resistance. That's quite impressive, young lad. You were able to guess my weight correctly. But it won't help you. Izuku stopped tugging the rope, taking a moment to catch his breath. All Might vaulted off the fridge, landing on the beach sand with as much grace as a hulking man could muster. Do you know why I brought you here, my student? Izuku squinted his eyes. Because while you wanted to give me a workout regime, you also wanted to restore this beach to its peak by having me clean it up as a part of my training. Yes. Precisely. He walked a few steps toward the waterline, folding his arms behind his back as if the ocean breeze had brought something to mind. This beach used to be a quiet place for families. It had food stalls, wind chimes, toy vendors, the whole deal. I used to come here as a boy. Izuku followed his gaze. It was hard to imagine. Now, the only chimes were the clinking of broken bottle glass in the sand. All Might, he said softly. Why didn't anyone clean it up before? All Might's shoulders rose and fell with a sigh. Because when society is broken in small ways, people wait for someone else to fix it. Heroes focus on villains, law enforcement has other priorities, and civilians grow used to the mess. But this, he gestured to the beach, is a reflection of what happens when neglect piles up. Slow, but inevitable. Izuku glanced around. It would take only a couple of moments for him to use his quirk and remove the trash completely, but he understood that wasn't the point. It was about hard work, not relying on your power to make a difference, but your moral character. The teen looked down at the rope still gripped loosely in his hands. So, you're saying, restoring this place, it's not just about the workout. It's about learning to care about the small stuff. The unglamorous stuff. Exactly. All Might turn to him, smiling not the camera-ready grin, but something gentler, realer. A hero doesn't just stop bank robbers. A hero sees what others ignore. They take responsibility for things no one's applauding them for. And sometimes, that starts with garbage. Izuku's throat tightened slightly, but he nodded. He looked at the rope again. He could feel the connection now, not just to the fridge, not just to his powers, but to the reason. To the why. He picked the rope back up. Then I'll move this fridge. All of it. The whole beach. I'll clean every inch. Even if it takes me years. All Might chuckled. That's the spirit. The symbol of peace, with a gleam in his eye and a gust of wind catching his capeless tracksuit like a flag, suddenly struck a heroic pose. With a grand flourish, he reached into the waistband of his jogging pants and pulled out a stack of slightly crumpled papers. The wind caught the top page, flapping it like a victory banner. I've already planned everything out in preparation for the exam, he declared, holding the stack aloft like it was sacred scripture, and put together an extensive workout routine for the next 10 months. Izuku's eyes widened as he took a cautious step closer. 10 months. I call it. All Might raised one arm high, light glinting off his teeth as he smiled wider than physics should allow. Symbol of peace workout regimen. Izuku blinked. You named it? Of course. All Might grinned wide enough to shame the sun. A true journey toward heroism must begin with a title worthy of legend. He moved the papers into Izuku's hands, nearly bowling him over with the sheer weight of it. This is no ordinary workout schedule, my boy. This is a complete life overhaul. Within these pages, I have accounted for your physical progress, your mental conditioning, and your quirk control. Izuku quickly scanned the top page. It was color-coded, meticulously charted. Times, zones, checkpoints, and meal suggestions, each section labeled with hyper-specific headings like mental core sync, protein-infused lunch block, and nightly recovery breath training. He turned another page. You even included when I should brush my teeth. Dental hygiene is vital to public image. All Might declared. And, wait, spiritual calibration journaling at 8:15 p.m. sharp? You must tend to the soul as you do the sinew. Izuku kept flipping. There's a bullet point for limiting spiral thoughts to 15 minutes maximum? Well, you're a bit of a worrier, aren't you? Izuku stared at the packet, dumbfounded. I feel like this is less a training plan and more the script for my entire existence. All Might beamed. Exactly. And by the end of it, you'll have forged yourself into a first-rate, physically and mentally prepared, spiritually balanced, full-throttle UA hero candidate. Izuku's head spun, but beneath the panic and sweat, something flickered in his chest. This wasn't just intense. It was personal, thoughtful. All Might hadn't slapped together some boilerplate plan. He'd seen Izuku, understood him, and created a program that built from the ground up, quirks and quirks alike. He swallowed hard. I'll do it. I'll stick to it. Every day. All Might clapped him on the shoulder, nearly sending him face first into the sand. That's what I like to hear. Now then flip to page 6. Warm-up circuit 1. Izuku's enthusiasm wavered as he obeyed. We're still on the warm-up? Only 304 days left of the program. Not that I'm counting. All Might shouted as he jogged toward the nearest trash pile. Well, I am, but don't let that distract you from your next set. Izuku exhaled slowly, rolled his neck, and picked up the rope again. 10 months. No sweat. Why you want me to pull that? Indeed. Across sand? Izuku gasped. That's not even a real surface. That's anti-surface. Consider it a metaphor, All Might said, slapping the truck's hood. A hero's path is never smooth. You must learn to move forward regardless of terrain. The next activity All Might requested had Izuku pulling a 4,000 pounds rusted, army green flatbed, its tires deflated, its windows fogged with age. A thick rope was already looped around the bumper of the vehicle. Izuku stumbled toward the rope and wrapped his trembling hands around it. Every muscle in his body was already protesting. His calves ached. His spine crackled. His palms were raw from the earlier friction. Even his earlobes hurt, somehow. Give it all you've got, young Midoriya. He took a step. Nothing. He crouched low, grit his teeth, and heaved. The rope went taut. The truck did not budge. Not even an inch. The sand beneath Izuku's sneakers scattered uselessly with each movement. His lungs shrieked for air. His vision dimmed at the edges. He felt like his entire rib cage might cave in from the inside just to let out enough carbon dioxide. His body was screaming. He froze, breath ragged. "What the matter, son?" All Might questioned. "Don't tell me you've already given up." A hum began to radiate from within his chest, a vibration not of sound, but of intent. Energy began to collect beneath his skin like pressurized light, building from his stomach to his shoulders, up his arms, and through his fingertips. His hands lit first, then the rope, then the truck. A soft green glow enveloped the vehicle, shimmering like heat on pavement. The sand beneath it compressed, almost liquefied, as if yielding to his. And then movement. Smooth, steady. The truck began to glide across the beach, the way a ship cuts through calm water. Izuku rose to his feet, arms stretched forward, eyes wide with disbelief and euphoria. "I did it," he shouted. "I moved it." He turned, beaming. Not quite young Midoriya. All Might stopped beside Izuku. "You used your quirk." Izuku froze. All Might crouched beside him. "The time for strengthening your quirk will come later." He looked Izuku straight in the eyes. "If you ever want to be a hero worthy of the title, you have to be more than just the power inside you. You have to own it, command it, integrate it, not fall back on it like a crutch." Izuku swallowed hard. "You are more than your quirk. Learn to build strength without it." The glow around the truck faded. Izuku let go of the rope. He could feel the exhaustion settling back into his limbs. "Let's pick it up again, young Midoriya." The day stretched on beneath the scorching afternoon sun, and Izuku didn't stop moving. His body was a blur of motion across the beach, picking, lifting, dragging. Every spare appliance, every broken couch, every rusted chair became part of his workout. He wasn't just cleaning the place up, he was rebuilding himself through it. All Might's booming voice echoed across the dunes like a drill sergeant. "Push. Don't give in to the ache. That's just weakness leaving the body." Izuku strained through another set of push-ups, hands planted in the hot sand, sweat dripping from his brow like rain. His arms trembled. He grunted and forced out 5 more. After that came running drills, sprints between trash piles, hauling tires, bounding over crates. Then bench pressing the back half of an abandoned car propped on bricks, with All Might spotting from above like a proud but ruthless gym coach. Every movement was painful, but strangely, rather satisfying. And it wasn't lasting. By the time he finished each set, the soreness in his arms would spike, and then fade. Not entirely, but enough for him to notice. Muscles that had torn under strain began to tighten back up. Microscopic tears sealed over in real time. His joints felt hot, swollen then strong. He paused mid-run, panting hard. He rolled up the sleeve of his sweat-soaked shirt and blinked. His biceps looked denser. Not huge. Not bodybuilder material. But definitely more defined than they had been that morning. "Is that?" he muttered, pressing a thumb into the muscle. It was firmer. Solid. His quirk wasn't just fixing him, it was adapting. The punishment he put himself through wasn't being erased. It was being processed. Integrated. Like his body was learning in fast forward. All Might noticed the hesitation. "Seeing results already, young Midoriya?" Izuku looked up, eyes wide, exhilarated. "I think I'm actually getting stronger. Fast." All Might crossed his arms, nodding. "Your healing factor's more versatile than I thought. It's not just returning you to the baseline, it's evolving the baseline with each effort. You don't just bounce back, you build." Izuku's eyes lit up. "That means I can train harder. Push further." "It also means you'll have to," All Might said, a serious edge to his tone. "Your growth rate could be incredible, but if you don't pace yourself, you could burn out the system before it matures. Don't rush greatness." Izuku nodded, chest still rising and falling with effort, but his eyes were bright. Focused. Right. No shortcuts. He turned back to the rope tied around another discarded refrigerator and planted his feet. The sun dipped lower on the horizon as he resumed hauling. The day 1 training had commenced, and today Izuku was tired, was the overstatement of the century. The sun had set, and Izuku laid on the now cooled sand, his breath quick and shallow and sweat causing his All Might-themed shirt to stick. "You've done well today," said All Might. The hero offered his hand to Izuku, which was gratefully taken. You showed determination that I haven't seen in some already established heroes. You'll be ready for that UA exam in no time. I won't believe I'm ready until I'm actually there. Izuku said, strengthening his posture. I want you to go home and get a dutiful sleep. All Might advised. Also don't forget the meal plan I gave you. Aha. That night, Izuku sank into the kitchen chair like a sack of wet laundry. His hair was still damp from the shower. His arms, once trembling, now simply throbbed in the background dull, manageable pain. He was clean, technically, but there was a deep, earthy fatigue radiating off him like steam. Across from him, his mother placed a bowl of steaming miso soup on the table and gave him a soft, worried smile. You look like you just came back from a war zone, Inko said, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear as she sat down. Are you sure this is a training program and not a military boot camp? Izuku gave her a tired, lopsided grin. Pretty sure. But I dragged a refrigerator and a truck today. Inko blinked. I'm sorry, what? He raised his hands defensively. It was controlled. Sort of. And supervised. All Might didn't even blink. Oh well, that makes it so much better, she said, placing a hand on her chest. At least the symbol of peace is there to make sure my son doesn't get flattened by industrial appliances. Izuku laughed light and genuine and leaned forward over the table, wrapping both hands around his soup bowl. The warmth felt good on his fingers. It was hard, he admitted. Like really hard. My arms feel like someone replaced my bones with spaghetti. And my legs are sore in places I didn't know had muscles. I almost gave up a few times. Inko's expression softened, her voice quiet. But you didn't. He shook his head. No, I didn't. He sipped the soup, savoring the salt and comfort. Then he looked up at her, eyes glowing with something more than exhaustion. I moved the truck, I really moved it. At first, it was just my quirk doing the heavy lifting, but I'm learning how to use both my body and my quirk together. Like I'm finally syncing up with myself. Inko tilted her head. Is that a good thing? It's everything, he said. It's what I'll need to make it into UA High. She reached across the table and gently touched his wrist. I'm proud of you, Izuku. No matter what. You know that, right? He smiled. Not just because it felt good to hear, but because for once, he believed it too. I know. They sat in silence for a few moments, the quiet clinking of chopsticks the only sound in the room. So the cicadas sang, and a breeze slipped in through the open window, brushing against the curtains. I think I'm going to get stronger a lot faster than we thought, he murmured, mostly to himself. My quirk, it's doing something. Like it's building me back better after every set. Inko arched her brow. So, what you're telling me is, I need to double the food budget. Izuku chuckled and slurped more soup. Maybe just invest in more protein. Well, as long as you're still coming home to eat. She smiled warmly. Even if you turn into a muscle monster, you're still my baby. Izuku groaned. Mom. Forever. They laughed together, and for that moment, the ache in his arms didn't matter. The struggle, the sweat, the weight of the training, all of it felt lighter. Izuku stood shirtless on the beach, his breath fogging in the pre-dawn chill. The sky was still a bruised violet, and the ocean waves barely whispered against the shore. But Izuku didn't notice the cold anymore. 3 weeks ago, he could barely drag a fridge 10 feet. Today, he was staring down the frame of a stripped-down city bus. No wheels. Full frame. Steel bones. His heartbeat was steady. All Might, he said, stretching his arms overhead, this is definitely past workforce regulations. All Might, crouched nearby sipping coffee from a thermos labeled #1 trainer, let out a hearty laugh. Life doesn't come with workplace safety, my boy. Izuku cracked his knuckles. How far? From the flags to the boardwalk. Just under 80 meters. Izuku exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. He didn't hesitate anymore. His body and mind were faster, more responsive. And the strange connection he felt between motion, matter, and will was stronger now. Sharper. He gripped the rope in both hands. A faint green shimmer coiled up his arms like mist curling through muscle. Remember, All Might said, standing now. No brute force. Sink first. Then flow. Izuku nodded. Got it. He stepped forward. The rope lifted. And the bus began to slide. Izuku stepped forward and the rope lifted without hesitation. The green shimmer around his arms pulsed, tethering itself to the bus like an invisible thread of intention. His breathing slowed. No rushing, no flinching. This time, he let the sensation wash over him, sinking his mental pulse to the weight of the steel frame. He felt the bus not just the resistance of the object, but its internal shape, rusted frame, twisted axles, old bolts and memory-sunk metal. It was like sensing the outline of a ghost. He didn't yank. He asked it to move. Slowly, steadily, the gutted city bus scraped across the sand, grating with a low groan. The friction was real, his muscles strained, every inch of him on fire, but his power channeled through it, balancing raw strength with finesse. 20 meters passed like nothing. He planted each foot carefully, pulled from his core, and stayed focused on the flow, not the force. From behind, All Might watched silently, arms crossed. He said nothing, but his grin tightened with growing pride. At 30 meters, Izuku staggered briefly. The back end of the bus caught a dip in the sand, and the shift nearly buckled him. He gritted his teeth and pushed harder. Sweat rolled down his forehead, stinging his eyes. His aura flickered, dimmed, then surged again, wild and unstable. Easy now, my boy, All Might called. Don't force it. Stay connected. Izuku heard him, but part of him panicked. He pushed anyway, overcompensating with a burst of telekinetic strength. The result was immediate. The front of the bus lurched forward, then lifted slightly off the ground. The sand beneath it exploded outward as if from a shockwave. The whole vehicle slammed back down at an angle, sending tremors through the beach and knocking Izuku onto one knee. Too much, he gasped. The bus teetered dangerously, half-tilted now. The green light around his arms sputtered like a dying engine. All Might was at his side in an instant. He didn't touch him, just crouched low, voice calm and close. You lost the rhythm. Izuku nodded shakily, eyes wide, arms trembling. I wasn't thinking. I just wanted to push through it like before. All Might looked at the tilted bus, then back at Izuku. Your quirk doesn't work like most. It listens to your will. And your will, when it panics, becomes unstable. Izuku clenched his fists, frustration crawling up his throat. But I was doing so well. You are doing well, All Might said softly. But being strong doesn't mean never losing control. It means knowing when you've lost it and getting it back. Izuku exhaled, shaky but focused. He turned back to the bus. It sat half-crooked in the sand like a monument to hubris. He stood up again, slower this time. Closed his eyes. Breathed in. Let the energy settle, not as fire, but as breath, as rhythm. The glow returned. Not brighter but clearer. Sharper. He reached for the rope again and felt the bus return to him, not as something to defeat, but as something to guide. With a steady pull, he leveled it. The grinding stopped. The wheels, still deflated, still locked, glided across the sand with surprising grace. He crossed the final 50 meters without fanfare. No power surges. No explosions. Just balance. Just control. When the bus reached the flags, Izuku let go of the rope. His knees gave out, but he was smiling, teeth bared, breath heavy, face smeared with sweat and sand. All Might walked over and offered him a water bottle. You passed today's test. Izuku took it, gulped, then leaned his head back toward the sky. Barely, he said with a raspy laugh. All Might gave him a quiet nod. Exactly. Which means tomorrow's challenge will be even worse. Izuku groaned into the sand. The lights in the kitchen were low. The apartment was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the scratching of pen on paper. Izuku sat hunched over his notebook at the dining table, a damp towel still draped over his shoulders. His right hand moved quickly, but precisely, carefully sketching out a diagram of the city bus from earlier that day. Training log day 32. Challenge, pulling deflated, stripped city bus, approximate 12,000 pounds. Result, completed 80-meter drag. Setback, overexerted quirk flow at midpoint. Lost fine control. Caused instability. Recovery strategy, recentered by syncing breath with energy rhythm. Used less force, more intention. Control brute strength. He paused, fingers hovering. Then, beneath it he wrote. Takeaway, my power listens to me. That means I have to listen to myself. Panic scrambles the signal. Fear makes me reckless. But when I breathe, I move everything. He stopped writing. His hand ached, but not in the same way it used to. It was no longer a pain of fragility. It was the ache of rebuilding. The use. He set the pen down and looked over at the photo on the wall, him and his mom, from back when he was 6. Tiny, round-faced, hugging her around the waist. He smiled to himself. Then he stood up and walked to the balcony, letting the cool night air brush his skin. Below, the city lights flickered like stars dancing in the sky. A new obstacle waited for him. This time, it wasn't a vehicle or a pile of twisted scrap metal. It was a person. Standing at the far end of the beach, dressed in black workout gear with a high-collared jacket, was a tall, wiry man with a short buzz cut, a long steel staff strapped across his back, and eyes like burnt-out coals. Izuku frowned. Who? All Might clapped a hand on his shoulder. Meet your new sparring partner for Phase 2. Phase 2. Combat training, All Might said with a grin. You've built up your strength. You've refined your telekinetic control. Now it's time to put those skills into motion under pressure. The man across the beach rolled his shoulders and cracked his neck. Izuku tensed. He looks intense. He used to train with underground fighters before I pulled him into the pro circuit, All Might said casually. Don't worry, he's not here to break you. Reassuring. All Might's grin widened. He's here to test you. He'll strike fast, without warning, and make you work for every move. Your job? Don't just dodge. Don't just block. Respond. Izuku swallowed hard. The sand felt heavier under his feet all of a sudden. Is he gonna use weapons? He asked. Absolutely. Fantastic. All Might step back. This phase will teach you balance under fire. Coordination between body and mind. Think of it as the final layer, learning to fight like a hero, not just train like one. Across the beach, the sparring partner raised his staff with a single hand and pointed it toward Izuku. A clear challenge. Izuku tightened his headband and stepped forward. No more dragging. No more lifting. This time, he'd have to move with purpose. The sparring partner approached without a word, boots crunching softly across the sand. He stopped a few meters from Izuku, the metal staff still resting lazily across his shoulders. He was older, maybe late 20s. His eyes were half-lidded, unreadable, but the stillness in his body told Izuku everything he needed to know. He's done this before. A lot. Name's Kuroda, the man finally said, voice low and gravelly. I'm here to bring the pain. That's not ominous at all, Izuku muttered. Kuroda smiled faintly. First rule, you don't get to ask when we start. Wait, what? A blur. Kuroda moved like the wind, crossing the gap in less than a second, staff already spinning toward Izuku's legs. Izuku barely leapt back in time, a jolt of panic igniting behind his ribs. He's faster than I thought. The staff swept again. Izuku ducked, planting his hands on the ground, and flipped away with a boost. A green shimmer caught the wind as he launched into the air and landed in a crouch several feet back. Kuroda tilted his head, mildly impressed. Not bad. You're jumpy. That might keep you alive. Izuku didn't answer. He was breathing fast, too fast. His heart raced like it had something to prove. He flexed his fingers, aura flaring around them instinctively. I can push him back. I just need force, more energy, more power, no. Flow, not force. Kuroda lunged again, feinting left but slamming the staff from the right. It caught Izuku in the ribs, not hard, but sharp enough to knock the air out of him. He stumbled back, nearly tripping. All Might didn't shout from the sidelines. He watched with his arms crossed, face unreadable. This was Izuku's to figure out. Kuroda spun the staff and came in again. Izuku felt the panic rise, and then something shifted. Instead of blasting out another wave of telekinetic energy, he let go of the pressure. He breathed. He listened. His next movement wasn't an attack. It was a slip. He moved with the incoming strike, twisting his body sideways as the staff swept past his ear. His aura flickered, not flaring but folding, wrapping around his body in a shimmer of awareness. He saw the opening before it happened. Kuroda's foot too far forward. Izuku's palm shot out not to strike, but to redirect. His fingers brushed the staff, applying a whisper of force. Kuroda stumbled not much, but just enough for Izuku to slide behind him, placing a hand on the man's back. A brief telekinetic pulse not to shove, but to guide, and suddenly Kuroda was the one off balance. He spun around, catching himself mid-stumble, and raised a brow. That, he said, tapping the staff against the sand, was clever. Izuku exhaled, stunned by his own calm. His heart was still pounding but not out of fear. Out of clarity. He didn't need to overpower every moment. Sometimes, it was about moving with the moment until it became his. Kuroda straightened his collar. Round 2. Izuku grinned, eyes gleaming. Bring it. Kuroda twirled his staff once and settled back into a loose stance, feet spaced just right, posture deceptively relaxed. Izuku, still catching his breath, widened his stance in return. The air between them tightened. Even the waves seemed to hush. Then Kuroda disappeared again. No warning. Izuku barely saw the strike coming diagonal, aimed straight for his shoulder. He didn't think, just moved. A jolt ran through his feet, launching him backward in a sliding retreat. Sand burst in a wave behind him. He landed, rolled, and sprang upright. Kuroda was already on him. Izuku threw up a barrier, quick, imperfect, more instinct than calculation. Clang. The staff cracked against the green energy shield, rippling like water. The shield held. Izuku reinforced it, layering the energy thinner this time, letting it flex instead of snap. When Kuroda's next strike hit, it bent like a trampoline and redirected the force sideways. It worked. Izuku charged, this time with intention. He reached out with one hand not to grab, but to read. His aura scanned Kuroda's momentum, tracking the tilt of his balance, the subtle tension in his muscles. A twist. A pivot. Izuku ducked low and swept his leg in a fluid arc, enhanced by a quick telekinetic pulse to add momentum at just the right moment. Kuroda stumbled but recovered fast. He kicked back, staff in reverse grip, and jabbed toward Izuku's face. Nope. Izuku snapped up a barrier with one hand angled and used the other to anchor himself in the sand, channeling his energy into his back foot. The staff hit the angled shield and ricocheted upward, away from Izuku's body. Kuroda's eyes narrowed. That had been intentional. Tactical. Better, he said mid-fight, breathing just a little heavier. You're adapting. Izuku didn't answer. He was focused, now fully present. He dashed forward not with brute strength, but with control. Telekinetic pulses fired from his feet and elbows, guiding his movement like thrusters. Every feint, every sidestep was measured, calculated by feel. He wasn't guessing anymore. He was reading. One touch to the sand here, slide. A gentle pulse through his forearm, redirect. He leapt again, pushing his telekinetic energy through his legs for maximum air time, and flipped over Kuroda's next swing. Kuroda spun, swinging upward, but Izuku broke his fall midair with a downward pulse of energy, slowing just enough to drop inside the arc of the swing. He landed. Both feet. Grounded. Palm strike. Not to injure, but to shove energy directly into Kuroda's center of gravity. Kuroda staggered backward, legs locking to stay upright, and skidded across the sand. He caught himself. Exhaled. Blinked. Okay, he muttered, lowering the staff. You're getting better, stronger. Izuku stood, hunched slightly, his arms shaking, a glowing shimmer still coursing faintly across his skin. His chest rose and fell like a drum. His knees threatened to collapse. But his face? Smiling. He bowed slightly, then wobbled. Still standing. Sort of. Kuroda raised an eyebrow. You're better than I expected. You don't just react, you learn mid-fight. Most kids your age either flail or freeze. Izuku wiped his brow with the back of his wrist. I do both. Just faster now. All Might finally stepped forward, clapping slowly. Magnificent. That, Midoriya, was true progress. He placed a firm hand on Izuku's shoulder. You've stopped treating your power like a weapon and started using it like an extension of yourself. Izuku nodded, too breathless to reply. Kuroda cracked his neck. He's got raw instincts. And the flow control's coming along. But don't baby him. All Might grinned. Wouldn't dream of it. As Kuroda turned to leave, he glanced over his shoulder. Rest up. Tomorrow we go again. Faster. Harder. Izuku collapsed into the sand like a deflated balloon. Of course we do. But underneath the exhaustion, his chest buzzed with something stronger than fatigue. Redirect. Flow. He wasn't fighting against himself anymore. He was fighting with everything he had. The room was still, dimly lit by the soft glow of Izuku's desk lamp. A breeze whispered through the cracked window, brushing the corners of his notebook pages. Izuku sat cross-legged on his bed, a small stack of open journals and hero analysis notes fanned out around him like puzzle pieces. His hair was damp again, second shower of the day. His body buzzed with fatigue, but it was a clean kind of tired. He floated a pencil in front of him with his telekinesis, not spinning it, just holding it perfectly still. His eyes were half-lidded, focused on nothing in particular. Breathe in. Release. The pencil lowered gently back to the notebook. The pen scratched quietly as he wrote. Training log day 42. Phase 2. Combat evaluation, sparring with Kuroda. Outcome, held ground. Redirected momentum. Integrated quirk control with physical response. Note, when I stop pushing and start listening, everything connects. He leaned back on his elbows, staring at the ceiling. The city buzzed faintly outside his window. He thought of All Might's words. Of Kuroda's blunt praise. Of the pulse in his chest every time he moved in perfect sync with his power. I'm not just training anymore. I'm evolving. His eyes drifted shut for a moment, and in that brief stillness, he didn't feel like a kid desperate to catch up anymore. He felt like someone becoming something greater. Go! All Might's voice echoed like a starter pistol through the concrete corridors. Izuku didn't wait. He moved. The warehouse district had been transformed into a mock urban disaster zone. Burnt cars, fake debris, collapsed stairwells, and obstacles wrapped in caution tape and barbed simulations. Dozens of broken buildings loomed like skeletal giants, their guts torn out to make room for chaos. This was a hero simulation, the first one. No sparring. No warm-up. This was a rescue, combat, and control exercise all rolled into one. Sensors embedded in the environment pinged against Izuku's aura as he dashed forward. He adjusted on instinct, bouncing off a crumbling ledge with a telekinetic pulse to reach the second floor of a fractured office complex. The earpiece crackled. You've got 2 civilians pinned under debris in Building B. Possible villain threat nearby. Prioritize evac. Got it, Izuku panted, pushing forward. He burst through a rusted door only for the ceiling above him to groan and collapse. With a gasp, Izuku threw up a layered dome. The rubble crashed down and bounced off the barrier, dust spraying into the air. He didn't hesitate. The moment it cleared, he sprinted through, mentally reaching for the pinned dummies placed beneath heavy scaffolding. His aura flared sharp, precise, and lifted the debris without cracking it, inch by inch. 1 civilian free. Then the second. As he hoisted them in a green glow toward the exit, something moved behind him. Attack simulation activated. A blur shot from the shadows dressed like a villain, fast and aggressive. Foam-tipped weapons in hand. Izuku felt it a second too late. He spun, midair, letting the civilians float behind him as he raised a shield. Crack! The foam baton smacked the edge of the barrier, sending a pulse back into Izuku's arms. He grunted and twisted. His counter wasn't brute force. It was a redirect. A pulse through the floor. A step to the left. A pull from the back of the attacker's knee. The villain stumbled, off balance. Izuku slammed them backward with a burst of kinetic force, just enough to simulate a knockout. All Might's voice returned. Civilians safe. Threat neutralized. Proceed to the next zone, 2 minutes remaining. Izuku exhaled sharply and sprinted again, boots echoing across the cracked concrete. He didn't stop. Barriers rose and vanished in seconds. He dodged falling rubble by the feel of tension in the air. He reinforced beams, redirected attacks, and calmed his breath. By the time he crossed the final zone, his whole body burned. The sky above the warehouse was streaked with orange and violet. The day's light was fading, but the energy still buzzed in Izuku's chest. He stood near the edge of the simulation field, sweat clinging to his shirt, green energy fading from his fingertips like dust dissolving into the air. The rescue dummies had long been hauled away. The foam-wielding attacker waved at him on their way out, impressed. All Might approached slowly, arms behind his back, his golden hair blowing in the wind. He stopped beside Izuku and looked out at the scorched course. 3 months ago, you couldn't move a fridge, he said. Izuku huffed a laugh, still catching his breath. That wasn't just dodging, All Might said, expression soft but serious. You protected 2 lives. You fought back. You used your powers with precision, and most importantly you thought like a hero. Cool head. Clear instincts. Prioritized others over self. Izuku's face flushed. There were still mistakes. There will always be mistakes, All Might said, gesturing wide. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be prepared. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Midoriya, today, you passed the threshold. You're no longer training to survive. You're training to lead. Izuku's breath hitched at that. But, All Might added, turning to face him fully, you're not done. From here on out, we shift into scenario-based control multi-phase tests, team simulations, unpredictability. This was the last solo trial. Izuku blinked. Team. All Might nodded. Yes. Because the path to becoming a hero isn't walked alone. You'll need to trust others and be someone they can trust. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. You've earned this next chapter. Izuku swallowed hard and nodded. I won't let you down. All Might smiled. I know. The city had quieted. A low, peaceful hum hung in the air outside the window. Izuku sat at his desk, hair damp again, towel around his shoulders. A mug of lukewarm tea sat untouched next to his journal. He stared at the blank page for a long moment before finally picking up his pen. Training log day 83. Simulation complete. Solo evaluation, passed. Final thoughts. I'm not the same person I was when I stood on that beach for the first time. I was scared, desperate, trying to prove I wasn't useless. But I'm still scared sometimes. Still unsure. But I'm not helpless. Today, I made choices with power I used to fear. I protected people even if they were fake. I moved through a collapsing building like I belonged there. I made mistakes, but I recovered. I didn't freeze. That means something. I'm starting to see the version of myself I used to dream about. Izuku closed the journal and exhaled slowly, letting the tension in his shoulders go. He didn't need to say anything out loud. The quiet was enough. The work was still ahead, but for tonight, he'd earned a moment of peace. He turned off the lamp. 3 months had passed. 3 long, grueling, muscle-tearing, lung-burning months of what Izuku could only describe as All Might's personal vision of physical training hell. He'd gained muscle, forged by endless beach cleanups, uphill sprints, and full-contact combat drills at dawn. His stamina had doubled, maybe even tripled. He could feel it in the way his body moved now, faster, lighter, steadier. And now, apparently, they were taking things in a new direction. Tomato seeds? Izuku blinked down at the tiny specks in his open palm. They didn't look like much. They were unimpressive, plain, dry, no bigger than freckles. All Might, sir? If you don't mind me asking, what are we doing with these seeds? Izuku looked at the small objects in his hand. They looked almost like spots left behind by a permanent marker. All Might, sir? If you don't mind me asking, what are we doing with these seeds? They were standing in a wide, cleared-out field near the beach, a quiet parkland area All Might had borrowed for training purposes, far enough from the public eye and strong enough to endure a few psychic anomalies. The towering hero's grin widened. He knelt beside Izuku, clapping his hands together like he was about to unveil a grand magic trick. You see, young Midoriya, All Might said, gesturing dramatically to the seed in Izuku's hand like it was a sacred relic. Now that your body is in excellent shape, if I might add, faster than I expected, we're moving on to something new. Testing the limits of your current abilities. Sharpening them. Honing them. Making them so precise, so fluid, they become nearly impossible to defend against. Izuku blinked again, then looked at the seeds. All Might laughed, hand on his hip. That's all right, my boy. This next stage isn't about brute force. It's about control. He reached into his utility pouch and pulled out a small packet of seeds, identical to the ones Izuku held, then gently tossed a handful into the air. The seeds scattered, fluttering like lazy brown confetti. Your telekinesis is already formidable hell. It's borderline frightening, but it's still wild in some places. You've got great range, excellent power scaling, and the ability to operate on the atomic level, which is unheard of. Izuku beamed at the praise. But, All Might said, holding up a finger, that doesn't mean it can't get better. More refined. More surgical. He crouched and pointed to the ground. Here's your first challenge. I want you to levitate a single seed exactly 1 centimeter off the ground. No higher. No lower. Hold it steady. That sounded easy until Izuku tried it. The moment he focused on a seed, it shot upward with a loud pop, zipping into the air like it had been launched from a slingshot. All Might didn't even flinch. Too much force. Again. Izuku grimaced, sweat already forming on his brow. He reached out with his mind again, narrowing his awareness, trying to lower the pressure. The seed trembled, lifted slightly, then jolted sideways and embedded itself in a nearby tree trunk with a soft thump. Close. All Might called cheerfully. Only 5 more dozen tries to go. Izuku groaned, crouching to grab another. This is harder than it looks. All Might crouched beside him again, eyes sharp despite his constant smile. You're used to thinking big. Lifting cars, redirecting waves, creating barriers. But real combat is often subtle. Split-second reactions. The difference between a near miss and a direct hit is often measured in millimeters. He tossed another seed into the air and caught it with 1 finger. These seeds? They're a training tool. You'll learn to read wind, pressure, motion, and most importantly your own limits. Izuku set his jaw, focusing harder this time. His aura shimmered faintly, and one of the seeds floated. It jerked, wobbled, then righted itself, holding steady just over the dirt. He inched it higher. A little more, just a little more. Too high, All Might warned. The seed dropped. Izuku sighed. But he didn't quit. By the 5th hour of this strange exercise, he was sweating buckets, his fingers twitching subconsciously as he hovered, rotated, aligned, and re-leveled seed after seed. He discovered things he'd never noticed before: how even the heat of his breath could disrupt a delicate levitation pattern. How his psychic output flickered when he got too emotional. How some seeds responded more quickly than others due to microscopic inconsistencies in shape and density. It was exhausting. But it was also exhilarating. He wasn't just getting stronger, he was getting smarter. More deliberate. More focused. All Might eventually called a break, handing him a water bottle with a grin. We'll move on to seed weaving next. You'll practice threading them through tight coils of wire at high speeds, simulating threading the eye of a needle mid-combat. Izuku almost choked on his water. Wait, what? Gotta keep that enemy guessing, right? All Might laughed. Besides, this is exactly what's going to give you the edge at UA. You're not just raw power. You're finesse. You're precision. When the others are blasting through walls, you'll be slipping through cracks. Izuku sat back on the grass, watching a few leftover seeds glint in the late afternoon sun. He was tired. His muscles ached. His head buzzed with concentration. But something else stirred in his chest too. Excitement. Maybe even pride. Okay, he said, eyes lighting with a familiar spark. The next day dawned with a sky washed in gray clouds and a breeze that smelled faintly of sea salt. Izuku was already on the field by 6 a.m., stretching out his arms and shoulders as All Might arrived, whistling with entirely too much cheer for someone who didn't have to psychically juggle seeds for hours at a time. Ready for today's challenge, young Midoriya? All Might called, his voice booming across the field. Izuku, who had half a rice ball in his mouth, gave a muffled thumbs up and quickly swallowed. As ready as I'll ever be. All Might grinned and gestured to a strange contraption he'd assembled at the center of the training grounds. It looked like a vertical wireframe spiral about 5 feet tall, with twisting coils made of gleaming copper wire. There were dozens of tiny openings, some only wide enough for a pencil to pass through. Attached to each opening was a small bell. Izuku stared. Is that a makeshift wind chime maze? All Might beamed. Precisely. You'll thread one of your seeds through this entire structure without making a single sound. If any part of the wire is touched, the bell rings and we start over. Izuku's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, noting the narrowest loops, the tightest corners. Some paths doubled back in sharp switchbacks. Others curved in lazy arcs traps, probably designed to lull him into complacency. How fast do I have to do it? He asked cautiously. All Might smirked. Eventually? Under 5 seconds. Eventually, Izuku repeated, voice flat. Of course. All Might handed him a single cherry tomato seed. For now, just make it from start to finish. No time limit. Just precision. Izuku crouched slightly, rolling the seed between his fingers before lifting it gently with a shimmer of pale green psychic light. He could already feel the resistance, the slight wobble of the air currents, the faint magnetic interference from the copper coils. His control had to be absolute. The seed hovered in place. Then it moved. Slowly, delicately, he guided it toward the first ring. His psychic field tightened, condensing into a soft whisper of energy around the object. It floated through the first loop easily, but the second was narrower, requiring a twist, a shift in elevation, and then a sharp drop. The seed scraped too close. One bell jingled softly. Izuku winced. All Might clapped once. Reset. Izuku sighed and refocused, lifting the seed again. Try after try, his progress improved. He learned to pulse his telekinetic grip, allowing for micro-adjustments as the seed twisted through the loops. He learned to anticipate the wire's natural sway, accounting for wind and his own presence disturbing the equilibrium. On his 10th attempt, he made it halfway before a single, traitorous bell tinkled near the bottom. By his 30th, he made it to the final curve and then clipped the frame right before the exit. I swear, Izuku muttered, hands clenched into fists, these bells are rigged. They're not, All Might said with a smile, arms folded. You're just learning where your focus drops under pressure. That's the point. Hero work isn't always about big gestures. Sometimes, it's the difference between a hostage getting out safely or not. Izuku breathed deeply. Control. Finesse. Control. By the end of the morning, Izuku had successfully guided the seed through the entire maze 3 times in a row without a single ring. Each pass left him more drained, but also more confident. All Might patted him on the back, nearly knocking him over. Outstanding work, my boy. You're already halfway to becoming a precision specialist. Izuku gave a tired smile, cheeks flushed. It feels good. It's weird, I always thought my power was just about force. Lifting things. Stopping things. But this is like threading a needle with my brain. Exactly. All Might laughed. You're learning to shape your quirk into a tool, not just a weapon. The sun had begun to peek out from behind the clouds, and for a moment, the training field glowed with warm gold. The next morning was different. The air felt tenser, tighter. Even the seagulls circling overhead seemed to squawk more seriously. Izuku arrived on the training grounds to find the field transformed. All Might had a series of makeshift buildings, plywood walls, barrels, stacked shipping crates, and even a few mannequin dummies scattered around like they were frozen mid-panic. Overhead, a complex system of drones hovered on rails, red blinking lights shining ominously in the early dawn. A small white dummy stood near the center of the field, wrapped in a yellow caution vest and child-sized clothing. It had a cartoonish smile drawn on its face. Is that supposed to be a civilian? Izuku asked, setting his bag down. Her name is Cindy, All Might said solemnly. She's a stand-in for a lost child. You're her only protection. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Cindy's kind of creepy. She has feelings, you know. She's made of foam. All Might ignored that. Today's goal is trifold. First, deflect incoming BB rounds using rapid response telekinesis. Second, protect Cindy at all costs. Third, move her to safety at the designated evac zone at the far end of the arena. You'll be under fire the entire time. Izuku swallowed. How many BB rounds are we talking? All Might pressed a remote. The overhead drones hummed to life. A hatch on one of them slid open and a volley of red paint-tipped BBs rained down on a nearby practice dummy. In seconds, it was coated in impact welts and crimson splotches. About 300, All Might said cheerfully. Izuku stared in horror. 300? Give or take. But I've adjusted their speeds to test your reaction windows. They start slow. They won't stay slow. The drones return to idle, their blinking lights pulsing in sync like a warning. Izuku exhaled, then took his place beside Cindy the dummy, placing a hand on her plastic shoulder. All right, I'm ready. Excellent, All Might said. Simulation starts in 3, 1. BZZZZT. The world erupted into chaos. The first volley came in from the left, 10 BBs screaming through the air like hornets. Izuku reacted instantly, throwing up a wide-angle telekinetic barrier that flared green and rippled as the rounds pinged off of it. He tightened the edges, then split the field into several planes, angled layers of force that redirected the next barrage into the dirt. He was thinking faster now. Smoother. 2 more drones activated from opposite ends. A pincer formation. Izuku narrowed his focus and shot one seed-sized projectile still hovering in his side pouch toward the left drone's nozzle, jamming it with a click. The drone sputtered, misfired, and spun out. Cindy giggled. Wait, that was just the wind. He ducked behind a crate, pulling Cindy with him. His telekinesis wrapped around her foam limbs like gentle scaffolding, shielding her body from a near miss. A round zipped past his ear. He turned and shattered it midair, reducing it to mist with a concentrated burst of psychic vibration. All Might, Izuku called out as he ran behind another barricade. Was this really designed for beginner-level training? You're not a beginner anymore, my boy, came the cheerful reply from a loudspeaker. Besides, you said you wanted to be a rescue hero and a frontliner. This is what that means: defense, mobility, multitasking, and nerves of steel. The drones surged again, this time faster. Izuku knelt, focusing, his arms outstretched. With a twitch of his fingers, he caught 7 BBs mid-flight and reversed their velocity, sending them arcing toward 2 upper-level drones. Ping, ping. They hit with solid force, triggering a small eruption of sparks from one of the drone's wiring. He moved to reposition, but Cindy was too slow. She fell sideways. No time to reset her upright. He anchored her with a psychic tether, dragging her like a sled across the gravel and shielding her the whole way. His barrier was tighter now. Sharper. More like a dome than a wall. The BBs began curving around him, redirected into loops and spirals mid-air, launching off into the side of the arena. All Might's voice crackled again. All right, young Midoriya. Last phase. Hostile reinforcement incoming. From the far end of the field, a foam robot taller than Izuku and painted red with an angry frown drawn on its face came barreling through the crates. It moved on wheels, arms flailing, and launched 2 paint bombs from spring-loaded launchers mounted in its chest. Izuku dove, shielding Cindy beneath him and launching a full-force shockwave with his mind that cracked the robot's right arm off at the shoulder. The paint bomb exploded in midair. A second later, Izuku redirected the splatter with a psychic twist, deflecting it harmlessly onto an already ruined practice dummy nearby. Sweat poured down his neck. He was panting hard now. But the finish line was in sight. He surged forward, Cindy in tow, bounding across the last 30 meters with a flickering barrier pulsing around them. A final rain of BBs tried to intercept, but Izuku expanded his field, creating multiple psychic spheres rotating around them like gears in a machine. The BBs never touched them. With a triumphant yell, he slid into the evac zone like a baseball player, clutching Cindy in one arm and mentally slamming the shutdown button with his other. The field went still. Silence. Then a soft round of applause echoed from the speaker towers as All Might's giant silhouette approached. Bravo, young Midoriya. That was masterful. Your reaction time is down to 0.22 seconds. Your defensive barriers held under rotational assault. And Cindy? He leaned down and examined the dummy. Still smiling. Izuku flopped onto his back, arms spread wide, gasping for breath. I swear, she winked at me. All Might grinned and crouched beside him. You're not just getting stronger, my boy. You're becoming versatile. In real battles, your ability to think, move, defend, and protect all at once? That's what separates pros from amateurs. Izuku let out a tired, breathless laugh, eyes half-lidded but shining. Then what's next? All Might's grin turned ominous. Tomorrow, multiple civilians. And night vision mode. Izuku groaned into the dirt. The next evening came cloaked in silence. Gone was the sun. Gone was the laughter. The training field was pitch black, save for the faint glow of floodlights from distant docks and the occasional flicker of red from the drone rails overhead. All Might had set up the new simulation hours ago. Izuku had been told to arrive after sundown, dressed in his basic combat gear and ready for the most advanced drill yet. He stood now at the edge of the training zone, rubbing the back of his neck nervously, eyes struggling to adjust. The air smelled like oil and wet concrete. Somewhere off in the distance, waves lapped quietly at the shore. All Might! Izuku called, voice quiet but alert. A spotlight snapped on above him, illuminating a narrow 10-meter circle. Everything else remained drenched in shadow. Welcome, young Midoriya, All Might's voice echoed over a concealed speaker. This simulation is designed to recreate an urban combat rescue scenario during a blackout. Your objective: locate and safely evacuate 3 civilians hidden somewhere in this field. Each one is a dummy embedded with biometric sensors that will monitor for damage, neglect, or abandonment. Izuku tensed. You'll be under attack the entire time. Visual contact will be limited. You may use psychic awareness to scan, but each use will trigger an electronic pulse trap that reveals your location to the drones. Choose wisely. You will have 10 minutes to get all 3 to safety. A loud countdown clock flashed briefly, 0:10, then it began. The darkness was nearly absolute. Izuku crouched low, breathing slow and steady. He reached out with his awareness, not with vision, but with the deeper senses of his quirk, the electric ripple of life, the faint hum of warm objects, the residual energy of footsteps pressed into gravel. He felt the first dummy 20 meters northwest. Cold foam. Shallow imprint. Curled behind a barrel. He moved fast, silent. The first drone spotted him midway. BB rounds shot through the dark. He spun on instinct, forming a curved psychic shield that caught the rounds and flattened them to the dirt. A bell rang nearby. He triggered a proximity sensor. Another drone awoke. Cursing under his breath, Izuku dove behind a ruined crate, psychic thread already wrapping around the first dummy's torso. He hovered it up and behind him, cradled in a protective shell of green glowing energy. One down. The second was harder. He felt it deeper in the field, higher elevation, wedged inside a half-collapsed wooden shack. But the moment he reached out with his full scanning ability to locate the exact position, BGMI, an electromagnetic pulse jolted the field. All the drones lit up. A shriek of metal filled the night as 2 mobile foam bots rolled in from the edges, launching paint rounds and whirling their limbs like drunken scarecrows. Izuku ran. One dummy trailing behind him. He ducked low, sending crates flying into the drone's path. A BB clipped his shoulder, painful but not piercing. He growled and countered with a blast of telekinetic force that turned 3 drones into shrapnel. He reached the second dummy's location under fallen wood, wedged beneath a leaning beam. He had no time to lift it carefully. So he did it all at once, isolating the dummy with one thread, raising the debris with another, and simultaneously forming a dome around all 3 of them. Paint bombs exploded against his barrier. The air stank of synthetic dye. But the second dummy floated free. Come on, he muttered, dragging them both behind a wall of rusted barrels. He set them down gently, scanning again. 5 minutes left. One more. The third signal came faint and flickering down low. Buried? Hidden? He traced the pressure of it beneath his feet, maybe 10 meters underground. A collapsed section of piping, a trap? There wasn't time to worry. He blasted open the top of the rusted pipe, crawled in headfirst, and found the dummy wedged at an angle beneath a support beam, simulating a person pinned in a natural disaster. "Hold on," he whispered to the foam face, even though he knew it couldn't hear. "I've got you." A ripple of energy swirled around him. He condensed it into a narrow thread and slipped it under the beam, lifted gently and slid the dummy free like it weighed nothing. Then the alarm blared. 2 minutes remaining. The drones swarmed. All Might wasn't holding back this time. Every mobile unit moved in unison, and the overhead drones formed a circle of fire around the evac zone. Izuku emerged from the pipe, 3 civilians levitating behind him like orbs of light. He took one breath. Then he ran. Paintballs zipped past. 1 grazed his ankle. 2 more collided with his barrier, but it flickered. He was running low on stamina. 1 minute left. He threw the first dummy with precision, catching it midair with a psychic glove just inside the evac ring. The second followed, curled, floating, gently guided down. The third. A drone shot toward it, full speed, ready to collide. Izuku teleported a slice of his energy midair, forming a split-second collision field that slammed the drone sideways into a pillar. The explosion was deafening. He dropped the third dummy with a second to spare. BZZZZZT. Simulation complete. The lights turned on. The field was wrecked. Drones lay scattered. Paintball streaks covered walls and dummies alike. Izuku dropped to his knees, lungs burning, arms shaking. All Might jogged in from the sidelines, beaming with both pride and awe. Izuku was too tired to talk. He just gave a weak thumbs up. All Might crouched beside him, placing a warm hand on his shoulder. Izuku's breath hitched softly. Maybe that was what being a hero really meant. The late morning sun streamed through the open windows of Aldra Middle's classroom, catching on the white chalk dust that drifted lazily in the air. The hum of cicadas outside mixed with the scratch-scratch of pencils as Ms. Kiyama's neat handwriting filled the blackboard with a sprawling mess of symbols and numbers. Izuku sat upright, hands folded on his desk, trying to follow each chalk slide. The equation was complicated, an unholy marriage between advanced algebra and physics. Even without psychic powers, his mind worked quickly. But with them? It was like each number was a note in a melody he could already hear playing in the background. "All right," Ms. Kiyama said, stepping back from the board with a grin. "This one's a bit above your grade level, but I want to see how far we can stretch those brains of yours." The class groaned as one. Izuku tilted his head slightly, his pencil tapping once, twice, then stopping. He didn't read the numbers so much as feel them. Each digit linked to the next in a chain of relationships: gravity, acceleration, force clicking together in ways that lit up the mental map in his head. No one else raised their hand. Ms. Kiyama glanced around, eyebrows climbing. No takers? Not even for a guess. Izuku's hand lifted almost instantaneously. She sighed, unsurprised by Izuku's willingness to answer the question. "Midoriya? All right, let's hear it." He rose to his feet, chalk dust clinging faintly to the scent in the air. "If you convert the units first and isolate velocity, it's 14.3 meters per second, he said, voice steady but quiet. And the negative sign indicates it's moving in the opposite direction to the reference vector. The room went still. Ms. Kiyama's mouth curved into an approving smile. "Correct. Perfectly explained too." She tapped the chalk against the board twice. "Class, this is why it pays to think a few steps ahead." The bell had rung for lunch, and Izuku had grown restless. The sound was a mercy more than anything. It broke up the monotony. He hated not being able to train during the school day. At least then, there'd be something to look forward to. Sitting still for hours was starting to feel like wearing shoes a size too small, an itch in the back of his mind that never quite went away. Advanced math and science classes filled most of his schedule, and they always went the same way. The teacher posed a question, the room went silent, and eventually he was the one to answer. It wasn't arrogance, just inevitability. Though his teachers seemed pleased to have a student so quick on the uptake, Izuku found himself aching for a real challenge. Lately, even the trick problems felt flat, like climbing a staircase only to find the top step missing. He pulled out his lunch from his bag, a still warm katsudon packed neatly in a round container. His mouth watered just opening the lid. His mother had made it last night, but he'd gotten in late from the beach after cleaning with all might, so it had gone untouched until now. Steam curled into the air, carrying that comforting mix of fried pork cutlet and sweet salty sauce. As the chatter of the classroom faded into background noise, he also drew out his current hero analysis notebook, the one with frayed corners and a few pages bent where it had been shoved into his bag in a hurry. Seeing this as good a time as any, he flipped it open and started scribbling, his pencil moving almost of its own accord while he mumbled in a low stream of consciousness. The funny thing was, most of the pages now weren't about anyone else. No notes on pro-heroes' battle stances, no diagrams of quirk mechanics from the latest sports festival video. Instead, the margins were packed with sketches of psychic constructs he'd tested, different workouts, superhero names, costume concepts, and different applications for his power. One page held notes on his potential ability to create fire by exciting molecules in the air. Another had rough notes on a compression sphere idea. He wanted to test something about folding kinetic energy inward until it could be released in a burst. He tapped the pencil against the page, not even hearing the students around him as they traded snacks and talked about weekend plans. His lunch sat half-eaten as he bent closer to the notebook, words spilling in a messy stream. The air around him had that faint static again, the barely there sign that his mind was working at a different pace than everyone else's. A shadow fell over his desk. Izuku didn't need to look up to know who it was. The familiar mix of heat and presence pressed at the edge of his awareness like the scent of ozone before a storm. Kaken. Katsuki stood there, lunch tray balanced in one hand, gaze flicking from the half-eaten katsudon to the open pages of Izuku's notebook. His mouth curved not quite into a smirk, but close enough. What's that supposed to be? More of your FNG nerd scribbles. Katsuki's tone was casual, but there was an edge to it, like he was weighing every word for a weak point. Izuku closed the notebook halfway, not snapping it shut. He didn't want to give the impression he was hiding something, even though he very much was. Not much of a concern to you. Oh really? Katsuki repeated, drawing the word out. He set his tray down on the desk in front of Izuku, leaning forward enough that the light caught in his eyes. Are you still wasting your time with that hero notebook crap? Thought that big brain of yours would be smart enough to quit pretending. Izuku met his gaze evenly, his hair slightly lifting. To his left, one of Katsuki's lackeys, Masaru, if Izuku remembered right, leaned over with a grin that was all teeth. His hand darted toward the notebook like he'd done it 100 times before, expecting no resistance. Izuku felt it before he saw it, the faint shift of intent, the small surge of focus in Masaru's mind as his target locked onto the notebook. Something in Izuku's own thoughts flared in response, sharper than instinct. The world around him seemed to slow. His eyes lifted, meeting Masaru's mid-reach, and for a split second, Izuku felt as though he had stepped through a door into someone else's head. Masaru's thoughts weren't words so much as flashes of intent: grab, laugh. Shobakugo and Izuku's own mind seemed to wrap around them like a fist closing around a string. So, the command wasn't spoken aloud, but it reverberated through him, spilling outward into Masaru's mind like blood into water. The boy froze mid-motion, his body locked, his expression still wearing that half-smirk but with eyes gone unfocused. His arm hung in the air as if he had forgotten his earlier action. Izuku's pulse pounded in his ears. He'd never done this before. Never even thought of it. The usual gentle sense of others' emotions had condensed into something heavier, more deliberate, like he could not just read but steer. Masaru blinked slowly, still frozen. Put your hand down, Izuku thought. Masaru's fingers curled back, lowering his arm with mechanical slowness until it rested at his side. The noise of the classroom seemed far away now. Izuku's heart was racing, but not from fear, more like he was standing on the edge of a cliff and had just realized he could fly. Masaru gave a small, confused shake of his head, as if waking from a daydream. Yeah, whatever, he mumbled, stepping back toward his seat without another glance at the notebook. From across the room, Katsuki's head turned sharply toward the scene. What the F just happened? one of the sidekicks questioned as he made his way over to Katsuki's side. Izuku purchased a gym membership at a small, no-frills place just a few blocks from his apartment. It didn't have the gleaming chrome machines or blaring music of the bigger chains, but it was clean, quiet, and best of all within walking distance. Every morning, before the streets were fully awake, he laced up his running shoes and stepped out into the cool air. The city still had that hushed, bluish calm before sunrise, broken only by the rhythmic slap of his sneakers against the pavement as he jogged toward the gym. Once inside, he set his phone and water bottle down by the wall and moved through the stations with practiced focus bench press, squats, pull-ups, rows. He didn't cheat with his quirk, not even a little. Every rep burned in a way psychic power never could, the resistance stubborn and honest. His muscles trembled, sweat slicked across his back, and his heartbeat thundered in his ears. There was a different satisfaction in it. Lifting a barbell with telekinesis was effortless, but feeling the weight strain against his grip, knowing that he was the one holding it up, was something else entirely. Every drop of sweat was proof he was building something from the ground up. By the time he finished with a round of planks and stretches, sunlight was spilling through the front windows, turning the steel frames of the machines gold. His arms ached pleasantly, his legs felt heavy but alive, and a small smile tugged at his lips as he toweled off. Knowing that he was growing from his own hard work made him feel a deep sense of pride. His quirk was incredible, sure, but this was his body, his effort, his will. And every day it was getting stronger. "Why, you're kidding, right?" Izuku asked, his voice pitching higher as his gaze swept over the massive hulk of metal squatting on the sand. "Not at all, young Midoriya." All Might's booming voice carried easily over the sound of the waves, his hands planted proudly on his hips. Izuku blinked at the object again, just to make sure he was seeing it correctly. Is this a shipping container?" The thing loomed nearly twice his height, its sides streaked with rust and faded paint that might have once been red. Deep scratches ran down one corner, and a section of the bottom looked like it had been partially buried in the sand for years. Seagulls had claimed the roof, glaring down at him like tiny, feathery landlords. "Indeed," All Might said, striding over and giving the container's side a hearty slap that made it shudder. "Found abandoned down the shoreline. Had a few friends haul it over here for your training." "How?" Izuku asked, still half in disbelief. "I mean, how does something like this even end up on the beach?" All Might shrugged with the ease of someone who had long since stopped questioning the absurdities of urban life. "The sea is a mysterious place, young Midoriya. But for now, your mission is simple: drag it from here to the seawall." Izuku's jaw dropped. That's at least." His eyes darted between the container and the distant concrete barrier. "That's hundreds of meters." All Might grinned, the sunlight catching in his teeth. "Yes. And you'll do it without relying entirely on your quirk. Use it sparingly, if at all. The goal is to build strength, endurance, and coordination, not to see how fast you can fling it into the ocean." Izuku stepped forward, pressing one hand against the rough, sun-warmed steel. It was heavy in a way that felt almost immovable, dense, unyielding. Even with his telekinesis humming faintly in the back of his mind, the thought of moving it without power made his muscles ache preemptively. He blew out a breath, rolling his shoulders. "All right," he muttered to himself, feeling the grit of sand shift under his sneakers. Izuku squared his shoulders and crouched, wrapping his fingers around the rusted metal lip at the container's base. The rough surface scraped his palms. "Ready when you are, young Midoriya." All Might called from a few feet away, hands on his hips and a proud smile plastered across his face. Izuku took a deep breath, feeling the salty breeze cool the sweat on his brow. Then he pulled. At first, the container didn't budge. The sand beneath it shifted slightly, grains spilling away like tiny avalanches, but the steel mass remained stubbornly in place. His arms trembled immediately, muscles screaming to keep a grip on the impossible weight. A faint hum stirred at the edges of his awareness, the psychic energy that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. He let a small pulse of telekinetic force ripple through his hands, just enough to ease the friction. The container creaked, scraping across the sand with a dull, grinding sound. "Good," All Might encouraged, stepping closer. Use your quirk like a tool, Midoriya, not a crutch. Izuku nodded, concentrating on the rhythm of his breaths, the tug of sand beneath his feet, the slow, grinding drag of steel meeting earth. He forced himself to feel the effort not just in his mind, but in every fiber of his body. Slowly, painfully, the container started to slide forward. Inch by inch, then foot by foot, Izuku dragged the monstrous shape toward the seawall. His calves burned, his back ached, and the familiar sting of lactic acid bloomed in his forearms. But there was pride, too, the kind that came from knowing this was his strength, earned and built, not borrowed. Halfway there, Izuku paused and leaned against the container, wiping the sweat from his eyes. He felt the weight in his bones and the fire in his muscles, and then, he let his quirk take over for just a moment longer. With a controlled burst, he lifted the front edge slightly, easing the container's drag over a rough patch of compacted sand. It rolled forward with a low groan, and Izuku quickly shifted back into pure muscle, pulling again with everything he had. All Might watched silently, nodding approvingly as Izuku crossed the final stretch. When he finally reached the seawall, he dropped to his knees, chest heaving. The container sat immobile beside him, still a beast, but one he'd wrestled into SBM. All Might clapped him on the shoulder, grinning ear to ear. Well done, young Midoriya. Today, you showed what true strength means. Izuku managed a tired smile, feeling the deep ache of accomplishment settle through his body. He was stronger than yesterday. And tomorrow he'll be stronger still. Keep pushing on, son. Plus Ultra. All Might's booming voice carried clearly despite the salt-kissed breeze. His massive frame settled firmly across Izuku's back like a living weight. Izuku's palms pressed deep into the grainy sand, fingers splayed wide for grip as the rough texture bit into his skin. The weight on his back was immense, All Might's broad chest, powerful arms, and solid torso pressing down, pushing him closer to his limits. The first few push-ups felt deceptively easy, muscles warm and steady. But each repetition added to the growing fire in his arms and chest. The sand shifted beneath his hands and toes, forcing constant micro-adjustments to balance the uneven surface. 1, 2, 3. His breathing synchronized with the rhythm of his motion, a sharp inhale as his chest lowered, a labored exhale as he pushed upward. The air was thick with the scent of salt and earth, mingled with the faint aroma of All Might's iconic hero costume. 50 push-ups in, his arms trembled visibly, quivering like leaves in a strong wind. The burn in his muscles was a fierce blaze, a mix of agony and exhilaration. His heart pounded, threatening to burst free from his ribs, but he clenched his teeth and refused to yield. Plus Ultra. All Might's voice surged, not just encouragement but a steady anchor. Remember why you fight, Midoriya? 100. Sweat dripped from Izuku's brow, stinging his eyes as it mixed with the salty air. He could feel the slight shifts in All Might's weight as the hero adjusted his position to ease the strain on Izuku's shoulders. That silent support fueled his resolve. His mind flickered briefly to everything he was fighting for: his mother, his dreams, the promise of becoming a hero who could save others. The pain was temporary, the goal was eternal. 200. His arms shook violently now, every muscle fiber screaming in protest, but his will held firm. The world around him narrowed to the cadence of push-up, breath, push-up, breath. Time stretched, each second feeling like an eternity of strength and struggle. 300. With a final surge, Izuku pushed his body upward one last time, locking his arms as he raised his chest high against the fading tremors. His entire body quivered with exhaustion, legs trembling beneath him as he lowered himself gently onto the sand. All Might slid off with practiced ease, landing beside him with a smile that radiated pride and affection. Impressive, Midoriya. You've earned your rest. Izuku gasped for air, chest heaving, eyes bright with the fierce light of accomplishment. Thank you, All Might. I won't stop getting stronger. Izuku wiped sweat from his face, feeling the cool breeze kiss his heated skin. The afternoon sun dipped low behind the rolling hills as Izuku and All Might left the training grounds behind, their footsteps crunching along a narrow dirt path lined with wildflowers and whispering grasses. The salty tang of the nearby sea gradually gave way to the earthy scent of pine and moss, signaling their approach to a secluded hot spring tucked deep in the forest. All Might walked with his usual confident stride, though there was a softness in his gaze today, as if the weight of countless battles had taught him the value of moments like this. Izuku matched his pace, muscles still humming with the lingering ache of their morning workout. "It's important to balance strength with recovery," All Might said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Pushing too hard without rest can break a hero faster than any villain." Izuku nodded, his breath steady in the cool air. "I feel it already. My arms are still sore, and I can't stop thinking about tomorrow's training." All Might chuckled, a deep, resonant sound. "Ambition is good, Midoriya, but wisdom is knowing when to let the body heal." The path curved, opening onto a clearing where steam rose gently from a natural pool carved into the rock. The water shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting the fiery hues of the setting sun. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur and pine, a balm to the senses after the salty ocean breeze. Izuku shed his training jacket, revealing skin flushed from exertion and chilled by the evening air. He stepped carefully into the warm water, the heat enveloping him like a comforting embrace. All Might followed, settling down beside him with a sigh of contentment. "Feel that? The Earth's own energy helps to mend what's been broken." Izuku closed his eyes, letting the warmth seep into every ache and strain. For a moment, the fierce determination that usually burned within him softened, replaced by quiet gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly, "for pushing me, and for moments like this." All Might smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening with age and experience. "The path of a hero is long and hard, Midoriya, but you don't walk it alone." The sun slipped below the horizon, stars beginning to twinkle overhead as mentor and student soaked in the healing waters. In that serene silence, Izuku felt something shift, a deeper understanding that strength was as much about patience and balance as it was about power. And as the night wrapped around them, the promise of tomorrow's challenges felt a little less daunting. The soft glow of a desk lamp cast long shadows across Izuku's room, the only sound the scratch of his pencil on paper and the gentle hum of his focused breath. The cluttered space was scattered with notebooks, sketches, and small objects, each a token of his relentless curiosity and drive. Tonight, the exhaustion from training had settled into a quiet calm, and Izuku was eager to test something new. On his desk sat a plain, unassuming pebble, smooth, gray, and ordinary. He picked it up between thumb and forefinger, feeling the subtle pulse of energy beneath his skin as he summoned his quirk's power. His eyes narrowed, mind sharpening, sensing the flow of psychic energy like a stream waiting to be guided. Slowly, carefully, Izuku wove his focus around the pebble, envisioning a transformation not just moving or lifting it, but altering its very essence. The air around his fingers shimmered faintly, a delicate ripple like heat on pavement. The pebble softened, colors shifting from dull gray to deep emerald green. Its surface rippled and reshaped, growing lighter, smoother, until it was no longer a stone but a small, intricately carved leaf made of jade. Izuku held his breath, awestruck by the quiet beauty of the change, something born not from brute force, but from subtle, precise control. He smiled softly, heart swelling with a mix of wonder and determination. This is just the beginning," he whispered. Carefully, he placed the jade leaf beside his notebook and picked up the pencil again, ready to record every detail. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new limits to push, but tonight, he had taken another step forward on the path to mastering himself. The sun created a golden glare over the campus of UA High. Students moved with a purpose as they rushed off to their classes, coexisting and filling the void with conversation, quizzing each for an upcoming final and living in the moment. The future moved quickly here. And in the middle of it all, Toshinori Yagi stood still. In his true form, the symbol of peace looked like nothing more than a lanky, ill-fitting man in a baggy hoodie and slacks, his hair tied back in a loose knot, a travel mug clutched in one hand. He looked like a teacher who hadn't slept, a bit of a relic among so many bright-eyed teens. Though he no longer needed to maintain this form to conserve energy, he chose to. Privacy was easier to come by in a world that didn't recognize him, at least, not at a glance. Disappearing into the background had become a necessity, not a luxury. Especially now, with the next generation rising and his own time winding down. And yet even now he drew attention. Perhaps it was the strange contradiction in his posture, the powerful stillness in his eyes, or maybe the faint recognition in passing glances. A few students gave him a second look, whispering, but no one approached. Not like before. Toshinori stopped at the frosted glass door marked Principal Nizu, raised a hand and knocked. "Come in," came a chipper voice from within. He pushed the door open. The principal's office was part cozy den, part high-tech command center. Books lined the walls in neat rows, a globe rotated slowly in one corner, and behind a sleek desk, atop a stack of documents, sat a small white-furred creature sipping tea. The principal was a rare case of an animal obtaining a quirk, which gave enhanced intelligence beyond even some humans. He had the highest IQ in the city, which allowed him to become the principal for the prestigious school. Toshinori, Nizu beamed, tail flicking once. "Please, sit down. You're earlier than expected." "I try to be," Toshinori said with a small bow before easing into the seat across from him. "I appreciate you seeing me on short notice." "Always," Nizu replied, tilting his head. "You rarely ask for personal time. This must be important." Toshinori rested both hands on his knees, his expression briefly unreadable. "It's about a student," he said finally. "Or a potential one." "Go on." "His name is Izuku Midoriya," Toshinori said. "He's a third-year student from Aldra Junior High. He lives in Mizudafu. No official quirk registration on paper, he's classified as quirkless. But that isn't the full truth." Nizu raised an eyebrow and slowly set down his tea. "I've seen it firsthand. The boy possesses many extraordinary abilities, telekinetic in nature. Unmeasurable. Possibly even unquantifiable by our current system. But it's not just the power that drew my attention. It's his character. His spirit." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "He reminds me somewhat of myself. Someone who wants to save others, no matter what." Nizu's eyes gleamed. "Yes. But not only that, but he possesses something I've never seen before. He healed me back to my full potential." Nizu felt his face morph into shock. He managed to heal All Might's catastrophic injury that nearly cost him a career? The principal sat quiet for a long moment. "I appreciate your candor, Toshinori," he said at last. "And I trust your instincts more than most. If this Midoriya boy has the kind of potential you describe, I'll keep a close eye on his entrance exam results. And if he does well, we'll talk again." Toshinori nodded, grateful. 10 months passed like years. The time had come at last. After the hard work, dedication, and grueling training, the UA entrance exam had finally arrived. This was the day everything changed, or it was supposed to. Even with that in mind, Izuku continued to move the garbage across the beach, never stopping for a moment. He bent down and wrapped his arms around a large metal file cabinet, rusted along the edges and heavy with sand. Shirtless under the rising sun, his body was no longer the fragile frame it had once been. His muscles had been carved through relentless grind and aching repetition, his core tight, his arms thick and corded with power. Sweat traced the ridges of his abs, glinting in the morning light, and his back flexed with raw strength as he hoisted the cabinet over his shoulder. "You just need to get it up the stairs, Izuku, don't chicken out." He reached the base of the crumbling concrete steps, the cabinet balanced securely against him. Carefully, he began the climb. 1 foot, then the next. The weight was light, proof that the teen had grown beyond his wildest hopes. After exactly a minute, Izuku made it to the top, gleefully throwing the cabinet in the garbage pile. Izuku straightened his posture, feeling his body instantly push the soreness away. From the edge of the beach walkway, Izuku Midoriya watched in quiet awe. She stood behind the railing, hands clasped in front of her chest, a thermos of warm tea untouched in her bag. The wind tugged gently at her sweater, and she squinted slightly against the morning sun as she watched her little boy move with a strength and confidence she'd never seen in him before. Not like this. For months, she had watched him come to this beach. First crawling, then standing, then lifting. At first, she was terrified he would hurt himself, that his heart would break when things didn't work out. But he never stopped. Not once. And now he looked like someone entirely different. Still her Izuku, but stronger, steadier, taller. His movements no longer hesitant or shy. There was power in the way he carried himself, a quiet certainty behind every step. And when he smiled after hurling that file cabinet, she saw it the look of someone who believed in himself. Inko blinked back the sting in her eyes and cleared her throat. "Izuku," she called, waving. He turned instantly, eyes wide, face lighting up. He jogged down the stairs with ease, the confidence in his stride almost startling. "Mom," he said, voice bright, flushed with effort. "I didn't think you'd be up this early. I wasn't going to let you go without saying good luck," she said, smiling as he reached her. "Besides, I had to see it with my own eyes." "See what?" "That you're ready," she said softly, brushing a sweaty lock of hair from his forehead. "No matter what happens today, Izuku, you've already come so far." He swallowed hard, nodding as emotion welled quietly in his chest. He didn't trust himself to speak. Instead, he gave her a hug tight, fast, full of unspoken thanks. "I'll go home and shower," he murmured, stepping back. "Then I'll head to the testing site." "Breakfast is waiting," she said. "Just toast and eggs, nothing fancy." "That sounds perfect," he said with a grin. And with that, Izuku turned toward the road, the rising sun casting his shadow long behind him as he jogged up the sidewalk toward home, toward UA, and toward whatever the future held. Izuku finds out that UA is even bigger in person. It was 7 o'clock. The campus was as lively as advertised in the brochure. The teens stood at the gate of the school. 2 H-shaped buildings stood in the overview. Izuku wore a green-striped tracksuit, taking a page out of All Might's book. As he walked through the entrance toward the exam area, Izuku could feel a ginormous amount of pride welling in his stomach. He was finally at the place that he had been dreaming about. His lips twitched, trembling on the edge of a smile. "What the hell is this?" A familiar voice rang out, sharp and grating. Izuku didn't need to turn around. He already knew. "Of course you showed up. Just what I needed first thing in the goddamn morning," Katsuki muttered, stomping up the steps with his usual scowl. Izuku slowly turned, meeting Katsuki's narrowed eyes with a steady look. "Morning, Kaken." Katsuki scoffed. "I'm not surprised you're here," Izuku continued, keeping his tone light, civil, even. "You've always wanted this too. I hope you're ready for the test. Let's both do our best." It was a genuine sentiment, but he knew better than to expect a warm reception. Katsuki snorted, his lip curling. "Don't lump me in with you. I don't need luck, or hope, or any of that crap. I was born ready. This exam's already mine." Izuku shrugged, unwilling to rise to the bait. Even the best can slip up. That's why trying matters, right? Anything can happen out there. Katsuki's eyes flared. "You trying to mess with me? Think you're hot sheet now just 'cause you put on some muscle?" His voice cracked slightly, too forceful to be casual. "You think you're better than me, nerd?" "No," he said simply. "I just think I'm ready." "Whatever." Katsuki growled. "Just move your cowardly butt out of the way before I send you flying." Katsuki scoffed one last time and shoved past him, storming off toward the testing center without another word. The tension seemed to lift with his absence, leaving only the buzzing chatter of the other applicants in its place. Izuku let out a slow breath, adjusting the strap of his backpack. "That guy seems like a huge JRK." Izuku turned to see a girl a few paces behind him, brown eyes wide with concern and curiosity. She had short chestnut hair tied up with a little clip and wore a navy blue tracksuit. Her cheeks were round, friendly, disarming. Yeah," Izuku replied with a nervous laugh. "You're not wrong." She smiled, stepping up beside him. "I mean, it's none of my business, but, wow. That was kind of intense." "You get used to it," Izuku said, rubbing the back of his neck. He's been like that since we were kids. Oh, you know him? She asked, surprised. I thought maybe he was just extra cranky because of the exam. Pretty sure that's just his default mood, Izuku said before he could stop himself. His eyes widened a second later. I mean, not that I shouldn't. She giggled. Relax, I was thinking the same thing. He blinked, caught off guard by her easy tone. I'm Achiko Uraraka, by the way, she said, holding out a hand. Izuku Midoriya, he replied, shaking it with a small, grateful smile. The two of them followed the growing crowd past the courtyard and into the main campus building. Everything inside looked sleek and polished, like a futuristic headquarters more than a school. Walls gleamed, lights hummed overhead, and every hallway echoed with the quiet shuffle of hundreds of students just like them, all gathered for the same dream. The testing hall smelled faintly of fresh paper and pencil shavings. Rows upon rows of desks stretched to the far wall, each one occupied by a hopeful applicant hunched over a thick booklet. The air hummed with a tense, expectant quiet, broken only by the soft scratching of pencils and the occasional shuffle of feet. Izuku sat in the third row from the front, his posture relaxed, pencil balanced loosely between his fingers. The written portion of the entrance exam, 45 questions spanning hero law, Quirk safety protocols, basic physics, and situational ethics, wasn't exactly designed to be easy. For most, it was the first real hurdle. For him, it might as well have been an early morning warm-up. As soon as the proctor gave the signal, his mind simply clicked into gear. Diagrams translated into equations, legal case studies into clear answers. Where others paused to reread, Izuku's pencil flowed steadily, every line of thought already clear before the tip touched paper. He worked through the final ethics scenario, checked his reasoning once, then twice because habits were habits, and set his pencil down. Only 20 minutes had passed. Izuku glanced around. Most of the room was still bent over their booklets, brows furrowed in concentration. A couple of students in the far corner were stuck halfway through page 3. He stood quietly, gathering his papers, and walked them up to the proctor's desk. The man, a sharp-eyed teacher with a neatly trimmed beard, blinked at him as if surprised to see someone moving before the halfway mark. He flipped through the pages, scanning for blanks. Finding none, his brow lifted slightly. You're only the third one to finish this fast in the past 5 years, he said in a low voice. As Izuku returned to his seat, the proctor slid his test to the side onto a separate stack reserved for grading priority. He'd finished with time to spare. But now, with the practical looming, his nerves returned like clockwork. The orientation hall was massive. Rows of seats stretched out like an auditorium, and towering holographic screens flickered above the stage at the front. Students filtered in from every direction, some sitting in nervous silence, others chatting with friends from their middle schools. The low hum of anticipation filled the air like static. Izuku and Uraraka were seated together, with Katsuki being placed in a seat on the other side of him, creating a pocket of tension for the two applicants. Wow, Uraraka whispered, leaning forward as she looked around. This place is huge. I kinda feel like I walked into a sci-fi movie. Izuku nodded slowly, clutching the strap of his bag. Yeah, it's a lot to take in. This was it. After years of dreaming, analyzing, taking notes, he was finally here. In the room. He glanced at the stage again, already imagining the layout of the practical course, running through strategies in his head. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. A powerful guitar riff blared from the speakers, cutting through the tension like a lightning strike. Everybody's attention soon focused on the screen. The huge projector screen flashed on with the UA logo. A blond man appeared, wearing leather apparel with speakers attached, and took the center stage behind a podium. What's up, my fledgling heroes? Can I get a to why? Cringe silence followed. No one in the room could respond to such enthusiasm. A beat passed. Then another. Hundreds of students stared blankly. The man tugged at his collar, sweat beading. Tough crowd, he muttered. Sheesh, what a hyped-up bunch you all are. Izuku couldn't help smiling a little, recognizing the man instantly. It's Present Mike. I listen to his podcast all the time. Uraraka just smiled, hearing Izuku's fanatics. Will you shut up, dork? Katsuki grumbled. Alright then. Let's get down to business, he shouted, his voice booming through the auditorium like a stadium announcement. I'll be giving you the rundown on today's practical exam. Are you ready? Yeah. Silence. A few students blinked. Someone coughed again. Present Mix-Eye twitched, but he powered through like a true professional. Man, you kids are stoic. I like it, intense focus. That's the UA spirit. He gave a thumbs up no one asked for. Let's roll. The screen behind him lit up again, displaying a massive 3D render of a faux urban battlefield. Streets, buildings, and industrial structures span the map like a villain's playground. All right, listeners. Present mic boomed, spinning back into motion like a DJ at a hero convention. As you've read in your brochures, you'll be participating in a 10-minute mock urban battle right after this presentation. Make sure you check your ID cards to know which bus to take to your designated battle center. Katsuki leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and casually glanced at Izuku's card over his shoulder. Looks to be a splitting up situation. Izuku nodded, peering at his card. Yeah, probably to keep people from the same schools from teaming up. Izuku, Group B. Don't look at my card. I'll kill you. He shot Izuku a sharp glare, holding it for a beat too long before turning away with a scowl. Tisitiamenet. Guess I won't get the chance to obliterate you in the exam. Izuku only smirked. Meanwhile, Present Mike hadn't missed a beat. The screen behind him shifted again, revealing 3 distinct black silhouettes, each shaped like different robot models. Now then, he shouted. In every battle center, there are 3 types of villain robots. You'll encounter each one worth a different number of points based on difficulty. The screen animated with point values next to each silhouette. Your job? Use your quirks to stop them. Scrap them, trap them, immobilize them. As long as they're neutralized, you earn points. But heads up, listeners. Attacking other examinees or pulling any unheroic stunts will get you instantly disqualified. So keep it clean and show us what you're made of. A few rows ahead of them, a student abruptly raised his hand. Excuse me. May I ask a question? Present Mike paused mid-gesture, then shot him a finger gun. Okay. A spotlight clicked on, bathing the speaker in a dramatic glow. He stood with a crisp, almost theatrical posture, holding the exam printout high above his head. His features were sharp, his expression calm but clearly self-satisfied. According to this document, he said, voice carrying through the silent hall, we are to engage with 3 types of faux villains during the practical. And yet, on the information sheet provided to us, 4 types are clearly listed. He tapped the page once, deliberately. If this is a misprint, then I must say you, the most prestigious hero academy in Japan, if not the world, should be utterly ashamed of such an egregious oversight. The room held its breath. Izuku stiffened in his seat. Even Ochako leaned forward. He cleared his throat and continued, his voice ringing with smug authority. We examinees are here today because we seek to become exemplary heroes. We expect a standard of excellence from the UA High School, just as the public expects excellence from us. If this institution cannot even provide accurate documentation, then I must question the competence of the faculty as a whole. A low wave of murmurs swept across the auditorium. Present Mike raised a brow but stayed silent, letting the boy dig his hole. Then the student turned. His gaze swept the room with theatrical precision before landing squarely on Izuku. You there? He said, adjusting his glasses with a sharp flick. Yes, you, the one with the curly green hair. Izuku blinked. Huh. You've been muttering non-stop since the moment you sat down. It's distracting. Incredibly so. If you cannot take this exam seriously, then I suggest you leave immediately for the sake of the rest of us who actually intend to pass. The room went silent again. Izuku furrowed his brow. He sat up straighter and met the boy's eyes calmly. I'm taking this very seriously, he said, voice hearty. I'm simply processing the information given to me. Maybe you're too easily distracted. The student sputtered for a moment, clearly not expecting pushback, before hastily sitting back down with a huff. Present Mike blinked, then smiled with all amusement. Nice catch, listener. But that's no mistake. The spotlight cut off, and the screen behind him flickered again, this time revealing the silhouette of a hulking, monstrous machine towering over the other three robot types. Its design was exaggerated and chaotic, massive limbs, spinning gears, and a glowing red eye in the center of its head. The fourth robot, Present Mike announced, is what we call the zero-pointer. Murmurs rippled through the room. It's got size, style, and enough firepower to wreck a whole block, but here's the kicker. It's worth 0 points. That's right, folks. Nada. Zilch. Confused voices echoed from every corner of the auditorium. It's there as an obstacle, not a target, Present Mike added with a wink. You'd be better off running than fighting unless you're looking to lose valuable time or get flattened. So watch out for it. Izuku swallowed hard. A 0-point obstacle that big? His mind whirred. They want to test our judgment, not just our strength. They're looking for how we choose our battles. Ochako whispered, well, that's one robot I'll be avoiding. Katsuki cracked his knuckles, smirking. 0 points or not, I'll blow it to hell just for fun. Izuku tried to calm his pulse, pushing away the nerves. Don't overthink it. Focus on the goal. Earn points. Move fast. Stay sharp. This wasn't just a battle. It was the beginning of everything. With no more hands raised and no further interruptions, Present Mike grinned wide and spun dramatically back toward the crowd. Well then, listeners, that's all I've got for you on the test. He threw both hands in the air like he'd just dropped the mic. But before you go, let me leave you with a present. A taste of that good UA spirit. The projector screen flashed with bold letters as he struck it. Final pose behind the podium. General Napoleon Bonaparte once said, a true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes. Pretty rad soundbite. He leaned into the mic one last time, voice booming with pride. So remember this when you're out there giving it your all, when it hurts, when it's hard, go beyond. The crowd barely had time to react before he shouted the words like a battle cry. Plus ultra. A powerful swell of music and applause erupted as the presentation concluded. Some students clapped, others just stared, each processing the moment in their own way. Izuku sat quietly, hands resting on his knees. The quote echoed in his chest louder than the music. Overcome life's misfortunes. The students began rising from their seats in waves, chatter buzzing back to life as the auditorium lights came back on. Proctors directed the examinees toward the exits, each holding up signs labeled with battle zone letters A through G. Izuku clutched his card, confirming it again. Field B. Ochako gave him a small wave as they moved toward the line marked B. Good luck. You too, he called back, smiling. Katsuki didn't say anything, but as he passed Izuku on his way to Field A, he gave a sideways glance, less a glare and more a challenge. Tisich, don't embarrass yourself. Izuku didn't flinch. I won't. They parted ways without another word, swallowed by their respective crowds. The bus ride to the arena was miserable. Students were crammed shoulder to shoulder, and the closer they got to the field, the louder it got. Nervous laughter, aggressive posturing, blunt trash talk, it filled the space like static. A few loudmouths zeroed in on quieter students. Izuku included. He could feel the tension bubbling just beneath the surface. Everyone on this bus was scared. Even the ones acting like they weren't. Waves of anxiety, sparks of aggression, flickers of excitement, they pressed against his mind like wind against glass. He breathed in, slow and steady, and pushed the noise away. When the bus hissed to a stop, he moved fast, slipping out ahead of the crowd. As his shoes hit the pavement, he couldn't help but wonder, how massive is this campus? But the thought passed quickly. He had to focus. He made his way to the front of the gathering crowd and knelt down into a sprinter's stance at the edge of the mock city's starting zone. Fingertips brushed cool concrete. His heart was steady. Around him, students continued to brag and chatter, most trying to mask their nerves. But to Izuku, those efforts were see-through. He could feel them. The tangle of mental frequencies was almost overwhelming: ambition, panic, ego, fear. It crashed against his senses like whitewater rapids. Still, he centered himself, focused. Let the energy flow around him like wind through a tunnel. Then something new strange buzzed at the edge of his awareness. A low mechanical hum, rhythmic and internal. Not emotion. Not thought. A machine. He turned slightly and there he was. The tall student from orientation. Rigid, focused, legs humming softly with barely contained power. Mufflers extended from his calves. The sound was real coming from him. Engine-based mobility quirk? Self-generated propulsion? Efficient. Izuku's mind had already half-filled a page of invisible notes before he caught himself spiraling. "They're so noisy," the tall student muttered. "This is UA, the top hero academy. And yet so many of them aren't taking this seriously. Are they even here to become heroes, or just to sabotage the rest of us?" He wasn't talking to anyone in particular, just venting aloud. "Still," Izuku replied, voice calm but firm. "This exam is pretty tough. I think they're just coping with it however they can." The student looked down at him, surprised he'd answered. "I don't think it's sabotage," Izuku continued. "People handle pressure in different ways. Some joke. Some display their confidence. Part of being a hero is to never judge anyone's situation." The pause. The tall student raised a single eyebrow at that last line. Izuku met his gaze without flinching, then turned back toward the massive steel doors. All around him, the examinees readied themselves, stretching their arms, bouncing on their heels, bending their knees in preparation for the sprint of a lifetime. Sparks flickered. Water vapor hissed. One student cracked his knuckles and vanished in a blur of static. Another grew armor across her skin, plates clinking into place like steel flower petals. Izuku exhaled slowly. A sudden flash of emerald energy surged around him, his aura igniting. The air shimmered. His hair lifted in wild tufts, crackling with invisible force. The pavement beneath him quivered ever so slightly as green energy pulsed outward from his body. No countdown. No warning. "Okay, start." The students stood confused. "What's the matter? There are no countdowns in real battle. Move." The doors exploded open and Izuku moved. His aura streaked behind him like green lightning as he flew across the pavement, faster than he'd ever moved before. Other students scattered to the sides, startled by the sudden burst of speed. Ahead, the urban battlefield stretched open, full of shadows, corners, and the mechanical thunder of incoming enemies. Izuku narrowed his eyes. He could do this. The doors to the auditorium flung open, and the UA exam had begun. Without hesitation, Izuku launched forward like a bullet, his body wreathed in pixelated green light. For a split second, he was nothing but a blur, a streak of emerald energy tearing across the pavement, and the gust of wind he left behind knocked the breath from the lungs of those nearest the front. The other applicants stood stunned, blinking at the space he had occupied just moments ago. It took them a second too long to react. And in a test where every second counted, Izuku was already gone. He tore down the main avenue of the testing zone, energy rippling off him in waves. His sneakers barely kissed the ground. Momentum carried him forward, a storm in human shape. Then came the first sound, a metallic roar. From around the corner, a hulking three-pointer robot stomped into view, sensors whirring, arms clicking into place. It had two large missile launchers welded upon its shoulders, its three-point value painted on its mechanical plates. Izuku gave a sharp glare to the machine. His aura extended, and with a sickening crunch of steel, the robot crumpled in on itself, knees buckling, arms twisting at unnatural angles before it exploded in a shower of sparks. "That's one down. Already 3 points." Izuku continued to run down the streets of the training area, sensing out the presence of the machines. Izuku skidded to a stop at the edge of the intersection, eyes narrowing. He was met by the red orbs of another two robots. The same three-pointer model and a two-pointer instantly charged him. The two-pointer moved first, its serpentine head swiveling as it hissed, then charged on all fours like a rabid beast. Its tail lashed violently behind it, scraping the pavement and leaving gouges in the concrete. The three-pointer lumbered forward in tandem, its cannon ports glowing with a slow, dangerous heat. It fired 3 missile shells at the teen, which were instantly frozen in the air by Izuku. The shells soon burst into small fragments, carefully aimed at the two-pointer. With a finger twitch, the tiny bits of shrapnel buried itself inside of the robot, exploding the machine in a brilliant flash of bright orange. Izuku turned his gaze to the three-pointer now charging at him. Stretching out his arm, the teen raised his hand, seizing the robot with his telekinesis. It shrieked in a high-pitched whine as invisible force lifted it mid-charge. Closing his first, Izuku twisted the machine mid-air. Its limbs flailed as its own momentum flipped it upside down. With a flick of his wrist, the three-pointer was slammed into the side of a crumbling building. Concrete cracked. Bolts popped. The robot dropped to the ground in a pile of junk. 8 points. The exam had barely reached the 2-minute mark, and the teen had already taken out 3 of the villainous machines. The air still shimmered with the heat of the last explosion when Izuku's mind spread out again like an invisible tide sweeping across the city block. Every tremor of steel, every faint whine of an electric motor registered in his awareness. Dozens of signals pinged at once, a map of targets unfolding in his head. He didn't slow down. Instead, he launched himself upward, green light flaring from his body as his telekinesis seized the cracked edge of a rooftop and yanked him up like a grappling hook. His sneakers hit the roof in a single stride, and he was running again above the streets now, with the perfect vantage point. Below, a one-pointer trundled through an alley, blocking it like an armored wall. He didn't waste time jumping down. Instead, he swept a hand toward the fire escape on his left. The rusted bolt squealed as the whole metal frame ripped free of the wall and hurled itself downward, smashing into the machine in a shower of sparks and bent steel. Now, a sharper pulse from his senses made him pivot. Across the block, a three-pointer loomed, towering above the others. Its arms were more like battering rams than weapons, built to crush anything in its path. Izuku grinned faintly. With a thought, several loose slabs of rooftop concrete levitated into the air, rotating like the pieces of a puzzle. He snapped them together into a jagged projectile that shimmered faintly with psychic reinforcement, then launched himself off the roof. He landed in front of the three-pointer just as one massive arm came swinging down. The blow slammed into a green force field and rebounded with a screech of grinding servos. The machine staggered backward. Izuku didn't give it time to recover. His projectile split into 6 chunks that whirled around him before rocketing toward the robot's joints. The reinforced concrete wedges punched into the limb servos, jamming them solid. One final telekinetic wrench sent the entire machine toppling onto its back, where he pinned it with debris until its systems sputtered into silence. 12 points. He hit the ground running again, slipping between crumbling buildings and overturned cars. A shrill sound drew his attention. 2 applicants were cornered at the far end of the street, a 2-pointer advancing on them with its mechanical tail raised high. Izuku didn't break stride. He flicked 2 fingers upward, ripping a manhole cover from the street and spinning it through the air like a giant discus. It slammed into the robot's midsection with a teeth-rattling clang, sending it skidding sideways into a lamppost. The other applicants gaped at him. The exam was still far from over, but Izuku's mind was clear, focused. Every target was just another problem to solve, and every scrap of the testing grounds from loose bricks to rusted street signs was another tool in his hands. And he was just getting started. The principal Nizu leaned forward slightly, paws clasped behind his back as he watched the monitors. The screens constantly switched from different angles. Students were shown running across the streets and rooftops destroying villains, surveying the testing area, or even helping other students. This group of students show lots of potential. Sounds of agreement filled the air as they continued to watch the exams. Students weren't allowed to know how many obstacles they'd have to face, nor how much ground they'd have to cover. It allows room for students to be intuitive with their quirks. Screens inside of the room flickered to different angles, with students running through the makeshift city. "Midoriya, Izuku," he said softly, almost to himself. "Another one of your little mysteries?" said a mysterious woman with jet black hair, wearing a quite revealing outfit. Nizu chuckled, his smile never fading. While some rely heavily on their speed and strength, others stake out the battleground and wait till their enemies are off guard. No one is truly a mystery. What we're seeing now is what happens when the right student finally steps onto the right stage. His control is unusual, added a hero with a protruding nose. He pointed at one of the screens. He doesn't just throw objects around, he manipulates force, momentum, structure. That serpent bot? He twisted it midair without touching a single joint. And that shrapnel earlier, the black-haired woman noted. Being able to use your quirk creatively. That takes more than power. That takes DSPLN. Nise's eyes gleamed behind his spectacles. Indeed. He's strategizing under pressure, tracking multiple threats, and using his environment. Nizu turned his gaze to the towering figure standing silently at the back of the observation deck. You were right, All Might. This student is truly extraordinary. Nizu praised. All Might gave only a small nod and turned his attention back to the monitor. He completely agreed and felt great pride in choosing to train the teen only 10 months ago. He had no doubt in his mind that he would pass the exam without trouble. Let's see what the applicants fare with this. The teen's telekinetic energy surged while he continued to destroy the robots. Green eyes showed intense focus as he fought off multiple villains consecutively. 10 minutes had now passed in the exam, and Izuku was certain that he could definitely pass the practical exam. From his rooftop vantage, Izuku could feel the entire testing zone breathing beneath him, metal joints grinding, treads chewing pavement, gears whining as the mechanical horde prowled the streets. His senses stretched farther, farther, like roots threading through the concrete. It wasn't just about where the robots were anymore, it was about their movement patterns, their weak points, and how the battlefield itself could be bent to his will. 3 signals converged 2 streets over. A trio of 3-pointers, moving in a tight wedge formation, their shoulder cannons already warming. They'd cut down slower competitors in seconds if they got the chance. Izuku sprinted to the opposite roof edge and vaulted off. Mid-air, he flung his hand toward a dangling electrical cable on a utility pole. His power snapped it free, the thick coil whipping toward him like a serpent. He landed in the middle of the street just as the robots rounded the corner. The cable floated at his side like a leash. One cannon fired, Izuku yanked the cable taut, and the shell wrapped in its insulated coils before detonating harmlessly in the air. He spun the cable once, twice, then lashed it out. The heavy tip cracked into the lead robot's sensor dome, shattering glass and frying circuits in a spray of sparks. Without missing a beat, he hurled the cable upward. It wrapped around a balcony railing above, and he used the leverage to swing himself sideways, landing atop the second 3-pointer's shoulders. His aura flared, crushing the weapon mounts like they were made of foil before he vaulted off, leaving the machine to collapse in a heap. The third was still turning its cannons toward him when Izuku grabbed a loose section of brick wall from a nearby building and slammed it into the robot's legs from the side, sending it sprawling. 23 points. He didn't stop to admire his work. Instead, he seized on another idea 2 blocks away. He sensed a cluster of 1- and 2-pointers swarming an overturned bus. In one breath, he sprinted toward them. In the next, the entire bus rose from the street in a halo of green light. Its massive weight barely slowed him. He spun it around in midair, using it as a battering ram to sweep the robots aside like toys. Metal screeched, glass shattered, and in seconds, nothing was left moving. 29 points. But now the real challenge was beginning. The more points he scored, the thinner the nearby targets became. If he wanted to keep the pace, he'd need to draw robots to him instead of chasing them down. So he did something risky. Izuku shot upward again, landing on the tallest intact rooftop in sight. Then he bent low, pressing one palm to the concrete. His power surged outward in a single, deliberate pulse, bright enough, loud enough, and heavy enough to shout to every nearby machine. Here I am. The street below erupted in motion. 2 1-pointers barreled in from opposite directions, flanked by a tide of lesser machines. Izuku's grin widened. Alright, let's go. He pulled a half-dozen rusted cars into the air, aligning them nose to tail into a spinning ring above the street. The first 1-pointer smashed into the barrier headlong, only to have the cars close in around it, crushing it in a grinding, metallic hug before flinging the debris into its partner. The smaller robots surged through the gaps. Izuku's mind danced. Street signs became spears, fire hydrants became geysers to knock foes off balance, lampposts swung like war hammers. Every move set up the next, A perfect cascade of blows and counters until the street was silent again. By the time the dust settled, he'd pushed himself into the mid-30s on points, and the timer hadn't even hit the halfway mark. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the focus and adrenaline, Izuku felt it, this flow, this perfect harmony between speed, power, and problem-solving. He could keep this up for as long as it took. And maybe, just maybe, he hadn't even touched his limits yet. The sharp crack of explosions echoed down a side street as Katsuki's figure stormed into view, a comet trailing smoke and heat. His eyes burned with that familiar fiery intensity, the kind of rage that powered his every move. Trash robots? I'll blow 'em to pieces, he snarled, palms already igniting with blazing orbs of concentrated flame. The first robot came charging, a bulky three-pointer with reinforced armor plates. Katsuki didn't hesitate. With a roar, he moved both hands forward, sending a pair of detonations bursting out like cannon fire. The explosion ripped through the air, slamming into the machine's chest with enough force to crack its plating and send a shower of sparks flying. The robot staggered but wasn't down yet. It swung a massive metal arm in retaliation. Katsuki barely rolled aside, flames licking at his boots as he stayed on the offensive. Come on. Is that all you got? He leapt forward, a trail of fire in his wake, and slammed a palm into the robot's side. The impact ignited the armor, flames racing along the seams until the entire machine hissed and buckled under the heat. Two more robots closed in, a two-pointer and a one-pointer, both trying to flank him. Katsuki's eyes narrowed. He spun around, releasing a rapid succession of small explosions beneath the two-pointer's legs. The ground erupted in fire and shockwaves, causing the robot to lose balance and crash into a nearby wall. Too slow, he shouted, charging the one-pointer. A quick burst of flame scorched the robot's sensors, blinding it just long enough for Katsuki to close in. With a fierce uppercut fueled by an explosive blast from his palm, he sent the machine flying across the street in a shower of twisted metal. The scent of smoke and ozone hung thick in the air as Katsuki crouched, scanning for his next target. His breathing was steady, but his glare was sharp, like a predator ready for the next kill. Bring it on, you pile of scrap. Katsuki blasted another two-pointer into a smoking heap, the fiery shockwave sending shards of metal flying in all directions. His breath came hard, but his eyes were sharp, scanning every corner, every shadow for the next threat. On the streets below, Izuku was already mid-leap over an overturned vending machine, his mind threading the battlefield like a chessboard. 4 two-pointers converged from the left, a single three-pointer from the right. The vending machine's frame hovered for a fraction of a second before launching outward, scattering soda cans like grenades. Each one struck with pinpoint force, exploding in bursts of sugary foam that blinded the smaller robot sensors. The three-pointer raised an arm-mounted saw. Izuku flicked 2 fingers, and the spinning blade tore free of its housing, slicing through the air before embedding into another robot's chest. A cluster of one-pointers rolled into the street just as a building's cracked facade caught his eye. One sharp tug and the entire upper balcony sheared away, falling in a controlled arc to pin the newcomers to the ground. 37 points. His senses caught something heavier, 3 two-pointers moving in formation down the main avenue. A perfect chance. He sprinted toward them, dragging along a trail of debris that floated behind him like a comet's tail. Chunks of wall, shattered glass panels, bent street signs. The first three-pointer swung. Izuku ducked under and fired a pair of glass panels into its joint servos, shattering them like ice. Before the machine could fall, he kicked off its torso, vaulting high. The debris trailing behind him whipped upward, spiraling together into a crude, spinning drill. It smashed through the second four-pointer in a hail of sparks. The third hesitated, a mistake. Izuku seized a lamppost, bent it into a U-shape midair, and slingshot himself straight into the robot's chest. His aura flared, crushing its armor inward like paper before it collapsed. 45 points. The crowd in the observation room murmured now, even Nizu's sharp gaze fixed on the screen. Remarkable adaptability, the principal said. Every engagement is different. He's not relying on brute force, he's refining with each move. Izuku barely noticed. The world was just a hum of metal, motion, and possibilities. Every sound was a cue, every scrap of the battlefield a resource. He was thinking 3 attacks ahead at all times, chaining moves so fast that no single enemy could react before the next fell. And deep in his chest, he felt it building like a storm front pressing against the shore. His power was ready to spike if he let it. But not yet. Not until he needed it. He darted left through a shattered intersection, where a cluster of 5 robots had gathered 2 3-pointers patrolling with lumbering menace, and 3 1-pointers zipping erratically on treads, clawed arms spinning. Instantly, his right hand snapped up, fingers curled like a conductor about to cue an orchestra. The air shimmers around him, and the first 3 1-pointers were ripped off the ground as if yanked by invisible hooks. They rose fast, too fast, metal groaning in protest before slamming into one another midair. A shockwave of telekinetic force crushed them together into a mangled steel knot before he launched the wreckage down the alley like a cannonball. The first 3-pointer charged, arms outstretched. Izuku didn't move. Instead, he flattened his palm toward the ground and the asphalt beneath the robot exploded upward in a jagged column of broken earth and debris, sending the machine flipping backward like a rag doll. While it was airborne, Izuku's eyes narrowed. The pieces of broken pavement hovering around him began to spin like orbiting moons. With a single thought, he fired them all at once. Each slab struck a joint, a sensor, a power core, surgical precision at breakneck speed until the robot was shredded mid-flight and crashed in a rain of sparks. The final machine, a sleek, spider-like 3-pointer, fired off a volley of missiles. Izuku stepped forward, the missiles froze in midair. One by one, they turned around, rotating neatly, then launched back at the bot that fired them. The robot didn't even have time to retract its limbs before the missiles collided in a massive, controlled detonation. Izuku stopped to think how much it was costing to have all these robots get destroyed by students. Just how big was the school's budget? As in thought, a new robot raced towards him with its scorpion-like tail raised and twitching with deadly precision. The tip gleamed like a blade, already coiled for a lethal strike. Izuku narrowed his eyes, aura flaring in response. "I've got you, buddy." Izuku blinked, looking up just in time to see a figure descending fast from the rooftop, red hair catching the sun, hands transformed into jagged metallic blades. The teen crashed into the robot with a yell, plunging both weaponized arms straight into its armored head. Sparks flew. The bot shrieked electronically, limbs spasming violently as it collapsed in a heap beneath them. The dust cleared. The newcomer stood tall, panting slightly, steam rising off his hardened arms. He yanked his metal-clad hands free with a wet clang and turned toward Izuku with a wide, toothy grin. "Phew! That one almost had you, huh?" Izuku blinked. Name's Kirishima," the redhead said, shaking out one arm before it returned to normal skin. "Sorry for dropping in. Saw that thing creeping up on you and figured I'd give you a hand." "Thanks. I'm Izuku Midoriya," he replied. The redhead gave a short salute. "Good luck out there." Izuku stared blankly as the teen, evidently named Kirishima, vanished back into the warzone. The high-pitched whir of machinery snapped his focus back into place. A 1-pointer rounded the corner at full speed, a compact little thing with a narrow body and a single wheel for locomotion. Its arms were thin but equipped with machine guns, and its arms fortified with large shield plates. It accelerated fast, too fast for most to dodge at such close range. A sudden pulse of compressed green light blasted from his hand, tearing through the air like a cannon. The force hit the robot square in the chest and ripped it clean off its wheel, launching it backwards into the brick wall behind. The impact was violent. Steel cracked. Circuit sizzled. The body of the machine shattered on contact, crumpling in a flicker of sparks and a puff of smoke. 1 minute remaining. Present Mick's voice erupted from every speaker across the testing zone, just as loud, just as chaotic as it would be in person. The announcement echoed off the broken buildings and rubble-strewn streets like a final war cry. The ground rumbled beneath Izuku's feet. He stopped mid-step, instincts flaring, eyes narrowing as the concrete beneath a nearby plaza split open like a cracked shell. With a deafening groan, a green mountain of a robot surged upward from the earth, concrete and steel falling in slabs off its rising back. Massive arms unfolded from its sides with the creak of straining metal, each finger thick as a telephone pole. Its head, featureless and boxy, rotated slowly as it scanned the battlefield. Its groan echoed through the alleys and shattered glass of the constructed city, shaking loose debris from the upper floors of abandoned buildings. Shadows danced across the cracked pavement as its towering form blocked out the sun. It was taller than any building on the block, its steps seismic. Panels shifted along its body, revealing engines glowing faintly green. Izuku watched as students ran in a panicked frenzy around him, trying to avoid confrontation. He could sense their panic. What a disaster! Someone could really get hurt by this monster. Izuku's aura flared involuntarily, reacting to the pressure. The robot turned slightly in his direction. It hadn't targeted him yet. Each footstep was like a falling building boom, 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 sending tremors down the broken streets. A voice. Panicked. Help. His eyes snapped to the right. Half buried in debris at the edge of the destruction was the girl who'd sat next to him in the auditorium. Uraraka. The ground shook again. She was right in the path of being crushed like a lone ant under the weight of the giant's steel foot. Izuku's fist tightened. He walked towards the mecha monster, his green aura illuminating the surrounding area. I'll handle this. The giant rampaged across the makeshift city, glancing in the direction of a teenager walking forward with a rising aura enveloped around him. Its red orbs gleamed, its foot prepared to smash the test taker. However, its foot stopped suddenly by a mysterious green glow. Izuku's arm was raised, completely stopping the attack of the villain. I won't let you hurt anyone here. Flicking his hand, the robot tumbled backwards, its enormous frame crashing to the ground with an impact that rocked the entire arena. Izuku launched into the sky, a trail of green energy bursting from beneath his feet, leaving behind a crater where he'd stood. Students across the battlefield stopped what they were doing. Heads turned. The wind whipped through the city ruins as the boy in green climbed higher and higher, his right arm pulled back, light converging into a brilliant blaze around his clenched fist. He let gravity take over. He fell faster and faster, aura flaring so brightly it cast a green glow across the rooftops. With a thunderous boom, Izuku slammed his fist into the center of the zero-pointer's chest, blasting a hole straight through its reinforced armor. Smash! The impact erupted in a shockwave so fierce it sent students staggering, hands raised to block the sudden storm of dust and wind. Debris scattered across the plaza. The robot convulsed once, then went still. As the dust finally began to settle and the last echoes of destruction faded into silence, groups of applicants cautiously approached the wreckage of the fallen zero-pointer. What remained of the massive machine was little more than a smoking crater of twisted metal, its chest split wide open like a collapsed tunnel. Scorched wires sparked weakly, the glow from its core already dying out. They stared. Dozens of students, some bruised, some limping, all stunned, gathered at the edge of the blast zone. Holy crap, one muttered, eyes wide. He punched through it? With one hit, another added, still catching their breath. That wasn't a support item. That was raw power. Did anyone see how high he jumped? I swear he flew for a second. No way that guy's a regular applicant. He's gotta be related to a top hero or something, right? Forget that he just soloed the final boss. At the center of it all stood Izuku Midoriya, silent amid the remains. He hadn't moved much since the final blow. His arms were still faintly glowing, but his face was calm, focused, not surprised, not gloating. Some students dared to approach, stopping a few feet away. No one said anything directly to him yet, but every glance said enough. Respect. Fear. They already knew. This kid, whoever he was, had just guaranteed his spot at UA High. No one could blow a hole through a villain that size and get overlooked. Not with that precision. Not with that kind of restraint. Izuku, unaware of just how many eyes were on him, exhaled slowly and let the energy fade from his hands. Dude, what the F did you do? One of the examinees blurted, wide-eyed and still coated in dust. He stood near the wreckage, a few steps behind Izuku, but clearly couldn't hold the question in any longer. More students turned at the sound, drifting closer now that someone had broken the silence. Izuku blinked. He glanced around, only now noticing the small crowd forming around him. Most of them looked stunned. A few were smiling. One or two were still just squinting, trying to figure out what they'd seen. He scratched the back of his head, sheepish. I just focused my energy into my fist using my telekinesis and unleashed upon impact, Izuku replied, his face showing excitement to explain the applications of his power. Wow. You're amazing, yelled an examinee. Yeah. What she said. Thank you. I'm sure you've all got pretty strong quirks. I would be glad to learn more about them. After the practical exams had ended, the exhausted but buzzing students were ushered out of the battlefield zones by proctorbots and staff in matching UA windbreakers. Present Mick's voice still echoed over the loudspeakers, though now with less energy and more direction. Hey Midoriya. Turned. He glanced back just as Uraraka jogged up to him, slightly winded, her ponytail bouncing with each step. Her uniform was dusty, a scrape ran across her cheek, but her eyes were bright. I was literally about to be flattened back there, she said, giving him a breathless half-laugh. You really came through. Izuku blinked. Are you hurt? I'm fine, she said, waving him off, but her voice hitched a little as she shifted weight to her left foot. Nothing broken. Just a scratch or two. He frowned. You're not fine. Sit down for a second. She blinked at the shift in his tone, gentle, but firm. Before she could protest, Izuku was already stepping forward, crouching beside her. Midoriya, seriously, it's not. Let me help. He gently placed 2 fingers just above the scrape on her knee. A soft green light glowed under his touch, pulsing with quiet energy. The warmth of it sank into the skin, not hot, but soothing. Like sunlight through a window in spring. Uraraka's eyes widened. Why, you can heal people? Yes, he murmured, focusing. I don't know the specifics behind it, but I like to think it's me pushing the wound closed. The blood vanished. The raw edges of the wound drew together, then smoothed over into clean, unbroken skin. She stared. When he pulled his hand away, her knee looked untouched. No blood, no bruise, just faint remnants of dust and torn fabric. Uraraka looked at him like she was seeing him all over again. That's amazing. Izuku stood up, rubbing the back of his neck. It's not a big deal. It is, she said, gently touching the place where the wound had been. You didn't just save me, you fixed me too. He shrugged, but couldn't hide the faint, proud smile tugging at his lips. I figure if I have the power to protect someone, I should use it all the way. Uraraka smiled too, but this time it was quieter, softer. Thanks. You're truly gonna make an awesome hero. They stood there for a moment in the clearing dust, the wreckage of a titan still steaming behind them. The sky had dimmed into late afternoon gold, casting a warm amber light across the sleek campus walkways of UA High. The air smelled faintly of scorched metal and ozone residue from the battlefield and carried the low murmur of tired voices and dragging footsteps. Students were trickling out of the exam grounds in scattered clusters. Some chatted excitedly in small groups, comparing notes and high-fiving like they just left a summer camp. Others walked in silence, their brows furrowed in thought, every step heavy with uncertainty. Izuku Midoriya walked among them, eyes half-lidded, his jumpsuit marked with faint dust streaks and the lingering pressure of psychic exertion. His backpack, now slung over one shoulder, was decorated with old patches and faded Pro Hero logos, All Might's iconic smile, a chipped Kamui Woods emblem, and even a small circular badge for Sir Night Eye, a nod to a hero most people his age barely remembered. He walked slowly, as if his legs weren't sure whether to move forward or turn him around to stare at the school one more time. The crowd outside the UA testing center was thinning, but Katsuki Bakugo barely noticed. His boots struck the pavement like hammers as he stormed down the concrete path, jaw clenched, teeth grinding, the wind rustling through his spiky blonde hair like it dared to touch him. Around him, other examinees were talking, some laughing, some looking stunned, all buzzing about the green-haired kid who'd taken out a zero-pointer with a single punch. He didn't need to hear the name, he already knew. Did you see that guy? He just floated into the air like a goddamn missile. I thought the zero-pointer would have been unbeatable, but he trashed it like it was nothing. Katsuki's fists curled so tight his palms burned with the crackling threat of an explosion. That nerd. That nobody. That even Deku. The image kept playing on a loop behind his eyes. Izuku Midoriya, standing calm as the foot of a metal giant came down and stopping it with one glowing arm like it was nothing. Then the jump. That blast. That moment where everything turned green, and the crowd forgot everyone else existed. Katsuki's breaths came faster. Not from exhaustion. From rage. How the hell could he be so strong? He turned sharply down a side street, away from the murmuring students and bright UA banners still flapping in the wind. A small burst of smoke escaped from his palm. He didn't even notice. Demon nerd, he muttered under his breath, eyes narrowing. What the hell are you? The evening fell and was a blitz of fun, with Inko and Izuku going out to eat katsudon, discussing their day. Apparently, Inko had gotten caught sneaking chocolate again, this time from the nurse's station at work. She retold the story with mock horror, dramatically reenacting her co-workers' faces as Izuku nearly choked on his food from laughing so hard. Their dinner was without stress, just comfort. Izuku animatedly walked Inko through the entire exam over bowls of steaming katsudon, describing the written portion's strange ethical questions and the practical exam's chaotic pace. He spoke in intricate detail, his chopsticks waving in the air like a pointer as he explained scoring metrics, robot models, even terrain layouts. He didn't even realize how fast he was talking until Inko had to pause him just to take a bite. Still, she listened patiently, eyes full of pride. And when he finally leaned back in his seat, satisfied and slightly breathless, Inko reached across the table and gave his hand a little pat. I'm proud of you, Izuku. It sounds like you handled everything like a real hero. Izuku flushed. I felt ready, he admitted, quieter now. I didn't freeze. I knew what to do. Inko beamed. Of course you did. As they stepped out into the cool evening, the sky painted with swirls of navy and indigo, Inko gave him a sly look. So, you met a girl, huh? Izuku nearly tripped over his own foot. What? It's not like that, Mom. She laughed, a bright sound that echoed off the quiet street. You mentioned someone earlier. Helped her during the practical, right? He groaned, dragging his hands down his face. I just helped her through the exam, that's all. She was nervous. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? Inko nodded, clearly unconvinced. Of course. Just helping a nervous girl. Very heroic. He shot her a look, but couldn't keep the smile from pulling at the corner of his mouth. You're making stuff up. I'm a mother. It's my job. Izuku rolled his eyes but let the silence fall between them again, broken only by the rhythmic sound of their footsteps on the sidewalk. He stared ahead at the sleepy city blocks, his thoughts drifting. She had a kind face, he murmured after a while. And she reminded me, a little of me. Back when I was scared all the time. Inko looked over at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. He wasn't trying to be romantic, he wasn't even thinking about it that way. Just reflective. Gentle. You helped her, Inko said, softer now. Yeah. He kicked a pebble off the curb. I think she helped me too. They reached the entrance of their apartment building, light flickering overhead as Inko pressed the elevator button. She looked at him again, this time more seriously. Just keep being you, Izuku. Whether it's one person or a whole crowd, you always show up. He didn't say anything, just smiled sheepishly and followed her inside. A week had passed. The waiting had been agony-long days filled with half-hearted distractions, restless pacing, and forced normalcy. But this morning felt no different, at least on the surface. Izuku sat at the dining room table, elbows propped up, hands loosely cupping his chin as he stared at the muted television across the room. It displayed a news feed, shaky aerial footage of a morning battle in a commercial district. The thread hero, Best Jeanist, was deftly weaving high-tensile cords through collapsing concrete and rogue machinery, suspending debris midair while civilians scrambled for cover below. His movements were impossibly precise, like a tailor mending the seams of a city coming apart at the edges. The eggs hissed in the skillet. A soft clatter followed as Inko cracked a second shell, expertly tipping it open and sliding the yolk into the pan. The warm scent of oil and rice filled the room. Her cardigan sleeves were rolled past her elbows, and she moved on autopilot, lips pressed together in the familiar quiet rhythm of their mornings. From his seat, Izuku heard the faint creak of the hallway door. Without thinking, he flicked his wrist subtly. The door swung shut behind her, guided by the invisible thread of his will. Not enough force to startle. Just enough to keep the warmth in the kitchen and the noise of the outside world out. He didn't mention it. Neither did she. A calm morning. Unremarkable. And yet, what? A single envelope hit the hardwood floor. The sound sliced clean through the room. The eggs kept cooking, but neither of them moved. Izuku's eyes widened slightly. The corner of his lip twitched. Slowly, mechanically, he turned his head to the front door where the letter had landed. By the stove, Inko had gone still. Her hand hovered above the pan, spatula poised mid-turn. She didn't blink. The eggs began to sizzle more aggressively, but she didn't notice. One beat. Two. Then, together, they leaned just a little, just enough to peek around the wall that separated the kitchen from the entryway. There was a plain white envelope, resting innocently on the mat. No golden trim. No dramatic packaging. Just a simple stamp. UA High School, Office of Heroics and Development. Izuku felt the air leave his lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. His heart wasn't racing, not yet, but something else was building inside his chest. A tension. A pressure. His legs didn't move. His brain spun through every possibility, every imagined scenario, every self-written headline and mental essay about how he'd failed or passed or maybe. You gonna open it? Inko asked softly. He glanced back. She still hadn't touched the eggs. They were beginning to brown around the edges. Her eyes were on him now, wide and hopeful but calm. Like she didn't want to jinx anything by feeling too much too fast. Izuku stood, the chair scraping back slowly against the tile. He crossed the room in quiet steps and knelt by the door. The envelope looked smaller up close. He reached out with shaking fingers, but paused then, without touching it, flicked his eyes toward his mother. Can you turn off the stove? She nodded and moved, mechanically. The sizzle died. The silence stretched. He lifted the envelope with both hands. It felt heavier than paper should. Back at the table, he sat down again, holding it like a fragile piece of glass. His fingers hovered under the flap. He hesitated. Inko didn't say anything, but came to sit beside him, still in her apron, hands gently folded in her lap. She gave him a quiet nod of encouragement. He opened it. Inside, nestled against the crisp fold of official paper, was a small, circular device, flat, metallic, and smooth as a river stone. It pulsed once in his hand, then activated with a soft hum, light flaring to life as a golden blue hologram expanded above the table. The kitchen lit up with warm light. And then, I am here. As a projection. Izuku nearly fell out of his chair. Inko gasped softly, a hand flying to her mouth. There stood All Might, larger than life, even in holographic form, grinning his signature grin, arms crossed in a display of heroic confidence. His hair swept back perfectly, his cape flaring in the digital wind. Izuku Midoriya. The recording boomed, voice echoing slightly in the room. Young man, you've made it. Izuku stared, frozen. All Might pointed forward as if addressing him directly. Your written scores were impressive, above average in all categories. But it was the practical where you truly shined. The hologram shifted, now displaying overhead drone footage of the exam. Izuku weaving through the industrial arena, green energy sparking around him, robots crumpling under his psychic force. From this angle, it was cinematic, graceful even. Where others were panicked, he moved with purpose. Precision. You racked up the highest raw takedown count of any examinee this year. All Might's voice was proud. Your ability to assess danger, act decisively, and neutralize threats efficiently marks you as a hero in the making. The image shifted again, this time showing a girl falling, rubble raining down. The same girl Izuku had helped up. The moment where his aura had surged in protective instinct, a green flash shielding her from falling metal. Her wide eyes, his extended hand. But true heroism isn't just about power, is it? All Might added, softer now. There was another aspect to this exam no one was told about. Rescue points. Inko turned to her son, eyes wide. Izuku's breath caught. For your selfless actions, your bravery in protecting others, even at risk to yourself, you were awarded an additional 90 rescue points. The number hung in the air like a trophy. Your total score not only met the standard, it surpassed it, 280 points. All Might's grin widened. Welcome to UA High School, Hero Course Department. You passed. The projection flickered gently, then faded, casting the kitchen back into soft morning light. Izuku didn't speak. For a moment, he didn't even move. His hands still held the letter, fingertips trembling slightly, heart thundering like a war drum in his chest. The silence pressed in around them, and then, a sound broke through. A single choked breath. He looked up to see his mother crying, quiet tears slipping down her cheeks, one hand covering her mouth, the other reaching for his. Izuku, she whispered, voice cracking. That was all it took. His hands dropped the envelope. His chair scraped back. And then he was in her arms, burying his face in her shoulder, his body shaking not with grief, but relief. With disbelief. With pride. All the fear and restraint. And sleepless nights collapsing in on themselves like a dam breaking. I did it, Mom, he whispered, voice thick. I did it. She held him tight, her hands pressed to his back like she was afraid he might disappear. You did. You really did. Izuku could read Katsuki's mind as they sat in the principal's office together. Anger. So much anger. The two were called in to get a congratulatory celebration, for their acceptance into UA. Silence filled the room as the principal brushed his own ego like a dirty horse. After 10 minutes of priding himself on his leadership and nurturing environment, the students were free to leave. Outside, Izuku stretched his arms across his body as he walked along the path. Now would be a perfect moment for more training before his first big day on campus next Monday. Glad that's over. That principal sure is proud of himself. Before he could take another step, a hand reached for his collar. A sharp tug on his collar. Izuku gasped as he was yanked backward, but only for a split second. His instincts snapped into place. His eyes flashed green. Katsuki's hand stopped in midair, frozen inches from the back of Izuku's neck. His wrist trembled, caught in a psychic grip as if it had been chained in place by invisible iron. Don't, Kaken, Izuku said quietly, not even looking over his shoulders. He could sense the blonde's presence before he even took a step toward him. Katsuki snarled, trying to force his hand forward, but it didn't budge. His entire arm stiffened, muscles straining uselessly. The hell, Deku? Let go. You little sheet. Izuku turned slowly, expression unreadable. His eyes glowed faintly, his hair lifting ever so slightly in the low breeze that circled around him. He could feel Katsuki's anger, taken aback by the face of absolute hatred that graced his features. I've told you to not go to you. I've told you. Katsuki's voice boomed. His body shook with resentment and frustration, unable to free himself from Izuku's telekinetic grip. I was supposed to be the only one to get into UA. This was the start of my tale. When people looked back at this shitty school, they were gonna see how much better I was than everyone else. Izuku could only stare at his former friend, who right now embodied less the spirit of a hero and more entitled brat. He felt pity for how clouded Katsuki's judgment was. And now? You've come along and said all over it. Then Izuku's glow began to fade. Slowly, he released the pressure holding Katsuki's wrist in place. The energy around him stilled, and his hair fell back to rest on his forehead. Katsuki stumbled a step back, breath ragged, his hands clenched into trembling fists. His palms sparked faintly, his body still begging for a fight, even if his mind hadn't figured out what for. I didn't apply to UA to compete with you, Izuku said, finally. I did it because I want to be a hero. Katsuki's jaw clenched. Izuku tightened the grip on his book bag. That's all I've ever wanted to be since I was a kid. I'm gonna be a hero who saves people. A hero who, when people see, knows they are safe from harm. You were never supposed to be one, Katsuki growled. You were a quirkless weakling who only ever followed me around. You're worthless. Simply a piece of gum stuck to my boot. You'll never be able to compete with me, Deku. Izuku looked at him, a tiny smirk crossing his lips. Well, he said softly, you are never gonna decide that. For a long moment, they stood like that, two boys from the same neighborhood, the same childhood, standing on opposite ends of something unspoken and irreparable. Then Katsuki turned, shoulders tight, storming off without another word. Just stay the F out of my way. Do you have everything you need? Yes, Izuku replied, tugging firmly at the knot on his red sneakers until it sat tight and even. Her brows pinched together. Do you have your notebooks? Your lunchbox? What about your phone? Oh no, did you forget your phone? Izuku huffed, bending down to double-check the other shoe. Yes, Mom, I have everything I need. I'd know if I left something. But you don't really know for certain, she insisted, already pivoting toward the hallway. Let me just go peek in your room and make sure. Mom. Inko turned, her eyes ready to fill with salty tears. Her hands held tight to her green cardigan as he stared at the doorway. It was only 15 years ago when Izuku would tie a cape around his neck and emulate All Might's famous fire rescue from last decade. I'm sorry, honey, she said softly, her voice wobbling. I know you can take care of yourself. I mean, you did fix my car when you were only 8 years old. The teen smiled, walking in stride towards his mother, giving her a small peck on the cheek. I'll be home later today. She only beamed, waving him off. Izuku reached for the doorknob, twisting it open. The cool air of morning swept in, full of city sounds, the distant honk of a car, the chatter of kids on their way to school, the faint smell of bakeries already at work. He pulled the door shut behind him and trotted down the apartment steps, his backpack bouncing lightly against his shoulders. After closing the door behind him, Izuku scotched down the steps and out of the front gate of the complex. This was it. Today wasn't just another school day. Today was the day. Izuku's high school career would soon begin. By the time he reached the front gate, he shoved a hand into his pocket, protecting it from the chilled air. His fingers brushed his wallet, his house key, then DMN. I forgot my phone. The bus ride passed in a blur of clattering rails and shuffling passengers. Izuku sat near the window, watching the city shrink into blocks and alleys as UA loomed closer with every turn. His nerves tingled, some of it his own, some of it his psychic energy pricking against the emotions buzzing inside the crowded vehicle. Excitement, anxiety, the occasional boredom. It was like sitting in the middle of an orchestra with no conductor. The bus jerked to a halt. And there it was. UA High School. The campus was even more impressive in person. Sleek glass windows, polished steel beams, walkways that curved with deliberate elegance. Even the trees lining the entrance had been trimmed with geometric precision. It didn't feel like a school, it felt like a place where legends were made. And right now, it was alive with the energy of first-year students. Their minds filled to the brim with different thoughts of panic. Izuku walked up from the parking lot. He wondered what his classmates were like personality-wise. Maybe Uraraka would be there, or that boy with the exhaust on his calves that chided him during the exams. Izuku grimaced. What if Kachan is in my class? He knew that Katsuki was powerful enough to get into you, almost easily in fact. However, that didn't mean that he wanted to interact with him while he was still arrogant and entitled. The hallway leading to the first-year wing buzzed with movement. Shoes clacked and squeaked against the spotless floor. The overhead lights cast warm reflections off the white walls and sea-green lockers. Voices rose and overlapped in a tangled chorus of excitement and nerves. Some students stood in groups, comparing room assignments and double-checking schedules on printed papers or phones. Others darted down the halls, uniforms slightly askew, clutching bento boxes, water bottles, or barely tied ties flapping behind them. Signs were posted above each classroom door in gleaming gold-on-black letters. 1B. Support Department. Hero Course, Section C. Each one marked a future dozens of branches on a tree of possibility. Okay, 1A should be on this floor? This map says so. Did I go the wrong way? Oh no, not on the first day. Izuku looked over the paper, glancing over each layout detail. Here we are. Izuku beamed a smile, his back straight as he walked down the hall. He followed the signs until he reached a familiar name. He stopped a few feet away from the door. It stood taller than any of the others he'd passed, whether by design or illusion, he couldn't tell. But it felt massive. Looming. Almost ceremonial. A few other students passed behind him, laughing loudly. One kid was trying to balance his bag on one finger with the help of a gravity-altering quirk, while another was live-streaming her walk to class with sparkles dancing around her head. Someone with large insect-like wings brushed past, muttering sorry in a low drone. Izuku didn't move. His heart thudded as he stared up at the door. He could almost feel the buzz of potential behind the thick steel door, like a current humming through the hinges. His fingers twitched at his side. He adjusted his grip on his backpack, the strap taut beneath his hand. His uniform clung neatly to him, navy slacks pressed, shirt smooth, red tie knotted tightly beneath the collar of his pearl-white shirt. He tugged it once, just for good luck. Then took a deep breath. Izuku reached for the door to 1A and opened it. Across the room, a floating school uniform moved casually, just a blouse and gloves drifting through the air, as if worn by nothing at all. The sleeves bounced as the invisible girl chatted with a nearby student. A real invisibility quirk. Not just camouflage, total light refraction. That was rare. The person she was talking to was a blonde guy with a long, thick tail, swaying behind him like it had a mind of its own. He moved like he'd been using it his whole life, fluid and balanced. Close combat pro. That tail looked strong enough to snap concrete. In the back row, a kid with the head of a crow leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, arms folded. Either he was meditating or straight up asleep. His whole vibe was calm, but intense. Avian mutation. Could be a quirk tied to his voice or senses. Maybe flight, though the wings weren't visible. Further down, two students stood out just by sheer size. One looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, thick skin, blunt features, and a tank-like build. The other was just massive, with broad shoulders, a thick neck, and lips like a brick wall. He looked like he could bench press the entire school. Enhanced strength? Durability? Maybe something more physical than flashy. Izuku couldn't help it, his brain was already connecting the dots. Quirks, combat styles, mobility, stamina potential. It was second nature now, like breathing. This class is stacked, he thought, a chill running through him. These aren't just kids with quirks. They're future heroes. What do you think you're doing? Remove your feet from the desk immediately. The sharp command rang through the classroom, drawing the attention of nearly everyone present. Izuku's head snapped up just in time to see the tall, sharply dressed boy in glasses stomping toward the back of the room. His arms were stiff at his sides, every step executed with machine-like formality. You're already damaging school property, the bespectacled student continued, voice rising with righteous fury. This is UA, not some juvenile detention center. Have you no respect for where you are? For the opportunity we've all earned. Katsuki Bakugo didn't even flinch. He sat with his arms draped behind his head, feet planted right on top of the desk like a throne, smirking like he owned the place. You serious right now? The other student faltered just slightly at the casual tone. Of course I'm serious. Katsuki raised an eyebrow, grinning now. What, they assign you hall monitor already? You get a quirk for having a stick up your butt, or is that just natural talent? But the other boy didn't rise to the bait. He straightened his glasses and lifted his chin, regaining his composure. I won't stoop to your level, he said, voice cool but controlled. My name is Tenya Ida, from Somei Private Academy. I graduated at the top of my class, and I came to UA to pursue excellence with DSPLN and integrity. He extended a hand, polite but firm. Katsuki looked at it like it was diseased. Someha? That's supposed to impress me? He stood slowly, letting his feet drop to the floor with a deliberate thud. If you think that makes you better than me. His eyes narrowed. Then I can't wait to crush you. Ida blinked, momentarily stunned. You're threatening a classmate with violence already? On the first day? Are you sure this is the right place for you? Katsuki clicked his tongue and rolled his eyes. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The two teenagers ceased arguing when they noticed Izuku standing in the door frame. Katsuki's eyes grew enraged when he noticed his childhood friend. "So Kaken is in this class, huh? That's just great. It's you." The entire class focused their attention on Izuku. The teen gave a smile and wave at the 18 eyes locked on his person. "Hey," Izuku greeted. "Hello to you as well," the student said, stepping forward dramatically. "I am Tenya Ida, from the Somei Private Academy. It is a pleasure to formally meet you under more appropriate circumstances." His posture was rigid, his arms moving with practiced formality like he'd rehearsed this. Introduction in a mirror. Izuku grinned, recounting his memory of his B rating at the entrance exam. "My name is Izuku Midoriya." Izuku's grin widened, recognizing him instantly. "Right. You're the one who told me I was breaking the rules at the entrance exam." His voice carried no malice, just faint amusement. Ida's face flushed slightly. "Guess what? I misunderstood the situation. Let me say firstly I apologize for my behavior during the exam." His hand fell to his stomach in a bow. "I clearly judged you without thinking. You saw another purpose to the exam that I failed to notice. I am truly honored to be in a class with such an exemplary student." Izuku felt his cheeks grow red. Thank you. I accept your apology. It was quite the exam and it caused you to feel a bit nervous. I could sense that in your mind while you were speaking to me. I never took it too hard. I was quite nervous." Ida admitted. "This school is the most prestigious in the entire nation. I also held an unspoken bias towards you, due to your incessant mumbling." Ida adjusted his glass, to show only white. "I now understand that what you were doing was far more complex than I realized," Ida said with a bow of respect. "To coordinate that many takedowns across the battlefield. It was an impressive strategy. Tactical. And effective. You also uncovered the true nature of the exam." Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. "We can all get like that. That's what makes us human. The important thing is we can start over as friends. My name is Izuku Midoriya." Izuku grinned, offering the boy a handshake. "And I am Ida Tenya. It's again an honor to have you in this school and as a peer." "Oh hey Izuku. I expected you to make it in." Izuku turned his gaze to the right. The same brown-haired girl appeared that he saved during the entrance exam. Izuku noticed her cheeks being more round. Not that he was paying a lot of attention to her cheeks or anything. They're just so round. "Uraraka." The boy greeted with yet another smile. The girl beamed. "I'm glad you made it and we're in the same class. You totally came out of nowhere and stopped that giant robot. That was really cool." Murmurs started rippling across the room. One student leaned over to whisper to another. A girl near the windows narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. Someone in the back gave a low whistle. They replayed it in that holographic disc. All Might announced the rankings. All Might? Why would he send you a hologram? Uraraka's face blushed, realizing her words. "Not that you're unremarkable. But he's the #1 hero." The discs that were sent did announce our point total and our placements. Ida laid his hands parallel to his body. "Cementos personally congratulated me. You receiving praise from All Might shows your strength." "Yeah." Uraraka beamed, pressing her hands together. "I got 4th place when I saw my projection. My parents wouldn't stop hugging me through dinner." "I managed to hold 7th place, Ida declared, thumbs stabbing proudly at his chest. "And you, Midoriya, where did you place?" Izuku froze, his face heating again. He could feel a dozen curious stares prickling at his skin. The last thing he wanted was to draw more attention on his very first day. "That really doesn't matter," he said quickly, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "We all did well." His green eyes darted toward the door, the floor, anywhere but the ring of expectant classmates. "No need to be modest," Ida pressed, his tone earnest. Uraraka nodded eagerly, her wide eyes full of encouragement. "Yeah, come on. Where'd you land?" Izuku exhaled slowly, realizing there was no escape. His shoulders squared, though his voice remained quiet. "I placed first in the exam." The room erupted. Gasps, sharp whispers, even the scrape of a chair leg against the floor as someone sat up straighter. A boy near the back muttered, "First?" like he didn't believe it. A girl close by leaned toward her desk partner, whispering, "The green-haired kid? Seriously?" "First place," Uraraka repeated, blinking at him in awe. "Izuku, that's amazing." Ida's glasses gleamed as he gave a sharp nod. "It is as I thought. Truly commendable." Izuku rubbed at his neck again, wishing he could vanish into the floorboards. "Really, it's not that big a deal. We all worked hard." But the murmurs didn't fade. If anything, the classroom buzzed louder now, Izuku's name on more than a few lips. "Wait, him?" a boy with purple ball adorned on his head said aloud, squinting at Izuku. "He doesn't look like he placed first. I heard he took out like 24 robots, including the zero-pointer," said a boy with a black lightning strike in his hair. "No way, really?" That green aura during the exam he lit up like a supernova. Katsuki, however, was on another level of anger. Izuku could feel his crimson eyes staring into his very essence. His teeth were gritting so hard they might have created sparks, as he let out an animalistic growl. Izuku gulped. Katsuki's blood was boiling over the pot. Not only was Izuku gonna be in the same class with him, but he also got first in the practical exams, ahead of him. "How the hell did your loser but get first place? What the hell did you do?" The blonde teenager jumped out of his seat and stabbed his finger in Izuku's chest. Katsuki's blood was boiling hotter than a DMN furnace. He'd been holding it together barely ever since he stepped foot in the classroom. First day at UA, top hero school in the entire nation, and he was finally where he belonged. He was supposed to be the best here. The strongest. The one everyone else looked at with their jaws hanging open. But then he heard it. First place. The word slammed into his ears like a sledgehammer. And worse, it wasn't his name attached to it. It wasn't Bakugo Katsuki, the future #1 hero. It was Deku. Fing Deku. The scrawny little nerd he'd spent years putting in his place, the pathetic nobody who couldn't stop mumbling about heroes and notebooks, the same extra who trailed after him like a shadow. And now? Suddenly he was the one on top? Katsuki's hands curled into fists so tight his palms ached. He could feel the tickle of nitroglycerin popping against his skin, begging to ignite. No fing way. No way in hell this DMN nerd outscored me. How the hell? Katsuki shot up from his seat, the legs of his chair screeching against the floor. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the startled gasps and whispers that rippled through the class. Did your loser but get first place? Every step toward Izuku made the red haze in his vision burn hotter. He didn't even care that everyone was watching. Didn't care that it was the first day or that some teacher might come in at any second. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. "The hell did you do?" he snarled, stabbing a finger hard into Izuku's chest. The contact wasn't enough to hurt, but it carried all the force of his fury. He wanted to shove, to shake, to rip the smug secret right out of him. But Izuku wasn't flinching the way he used to. He wasn't shrinking back, stammering apologies like the useless nobody Katsuki remembered. He was just standing there, not even glancing in his direction, but to the podium next to him. And that only made the rage boil higher. The first place. Ahead of me. It was unthinkable. Unacceptable. There was no way in hell Katsuki was letting that stand. "If you're gonna waste time with all this chit-chat, then you should leave." Dead silence filled the room. All eyes turned to the front, where the voice had come from. What they saw didn't exactly scream pro-hero. A tall, disheveled man stood half-slouched in the doorway, wrapped head to toe in a yellow full-body sleeping bag. Long, unkempt black hair framed a face that looked like it hadn't known a proper night's sleep in years. His eyes were dull, half-lidded, and completely unimpressed by what he saw. Uraraka yelped, startled, and instinctively ducked behind Izuku like he might somehow protect her from whatever this was. "Is that a cocoon?" someone whispered. The man didn't react. He slowly shuffled forward, dragging the sleeping bag across the floor like it weighed as much as a body. "Welcome to UA's hero course," he mumbled, voice rough with fatigue. The yellow caterpillar brought out his hand, holding a juice box that he slurped down violently. "It took you all almost 8 seconds to be quiet," he said as he unzipped the bag, dressed in a black outfit that a yellow utility belt and a colorless wrap around his neck. His hair was mangy with pieces sticking up out of place. You don't have time to waste here. So if you're here to yell and slack off, please don't waste my time. All of you need to get to your seats. Chairs scraped against the floor in a rush as students scrambled into their seats. Izuku, heart racing, found his assigned desk unfortunately right behind Katsuki. He swallowed as his old friend-turned-bully shot him a sidelong glare before slumping forward with his arms crossed. The man, if he could still be described as awake, yawned, eyes bloodshot, and spoke again. I'm Aizawa Shoyuda, your homeroom teacher. The way he said it was lifeless, like every word was a burden he had to drag out of his throat. No inflection. No enthusiasm. No pride. Just a flat announcement that hung in the air like stale smoke. For a moment, no one moved or breathed. It was difficult to imagine this was the person entrusted with shaping the future of Japan's next generation of pro-heroes. A beat passed. Aizawa sighed like they'd just personally inconvenienced him by existing. Izuku saw Aizawa reach into his carrier duffel bag and swiftly pull out a blue jumpsuit with red and white trims. Put these uniforms on as quickly as you can and go outside. A tentative hand went up from somewhere in the back. Outside where exactly? Aizawa's head swiveled toward the speaker. His half-lidded eyes narrowed just slightly, and the poor student froze under the weight of his look. The training grounds, Aizawa replied. A sigh followed, long and tired, like it was an effort just to explain. The room remained still, uncertainty flickering in a dozen pairs of eyes. Weren't they supposed to be at orientation right now? Shouldn't there have been a welcome assembly, a speech from the principal, some sort of ceremonial kickoff? Instead, their homeroom teacher, who looked like he'd crawled out of a dumpster, was telling them to suit up and march straight into training. Aizawa's gaze swept over the frozen students again. Why are you still sitting here? Didn't I give an order? His tone remained flat, but there was an edge to it now, sharp enough to cut. That did it. Chairs scraped, bags rustled, and a chorus of hurried, "Yes, sir," rang out. Izuku clutched the folded jumpsuit as he stood, skeptical. Something about this didn't line up. They just had orientation yesterday. Why were they skipping right into training on the first day? Was this some kind of test? A quirk apprehension test? The class shouted in unison, voices bouncing off the walls of the training field like a thunderclap. Aizawa didn't flinch. He stood with hands in his pockets, expression deadpan, his hair rustling faintly in the wind. Uraraka stepped forward, face pinched in confusion. What about orientation? We're gonna miss it. Aizawa gave her a slow blink, clearly unimpressed. If you want to go listen to some feel-good speeches and shake hands, there are other departments for that. Uraraka shrank back slightly, caught off guard by how blunt he was. Izuku could only give a sideways glance. This is the hero course, he continued, voice flat. And in this course, your time is precious. You're here to train. To improve. Not to be coddled. Aizawa said plainly as he eyed the crowd of young students. UA is quite famous for its independent education system. In layman's terms, I can run my classroom as I see fit. The students remained silent. Good. He glanced at a device in his hand. When you all were in middle school, you did various aptitude tests in your respective gym classes. Japan seems intent on excluding quirks when conducting these tests to give the lesser a chance to compete. It's completely unrealistic and time-wasting for the advanced students. His eyes fell on Izuku, who felt a sharp chill. Midoriya. Izuku shivered. How far could you throw in middle school without your quirk? 11 meters, sir. Izuku said, blemishing. It was honestly embarrassing to admit, considering that now, even without his quirk, he could probably do way more. Now try it with your quirk. Do whatever you want. Just don't leave the white circle. He grasped the handheld device firmly. Do your best. Izuku nodded quickly, his throat dry. The weight of 20 sets of eyes pressed down on him, expectant, curious, skeptical. He inhaled deeply and stepped back into the white circle, planting his sneakers firmly into the dirt. He slid into a throwing stance, shoulders tightening with anticipation. Murmurs rippled through the group. Is he really gonna? What's with that glowing stuff around him? Whoa! A hush fell as Izuku let the energy rise. It answered him like it always did, warm and steady, rushing through his veins before pouring out as light. The familiar green aura flared to life around him, crackling faintly in the air. Pebbles near his feet trembled and lifted, suspended in orbit. Gasps erupted from the class. Even Bakugo's eyes widened for a split second before narrowing again, lips pulling into a scowl. Here goes nothing. Izuku drew his arm back, feeling the psychic energy surge into his grip, wrapping around the ball like an extension of his own muscles. His breath steadied, then whoosh,